Okay, welcome to the Select Board meeting. It's Monday, October 28th, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have a few updates, and first I want to say we grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record this evening's meeting. Is there anyone else wishing to record the meeting tonight?
Johnson, just the Comcast portion.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Updates. For the town to know, we have come to an agreement with our new town administrator, and Chris Coleman will be starting with us on Monday, November 25th. Later in the evening, we'll be discussing extending our interim town administrator, Mike Gillette's contract, to stay with us until December 6th to provide for some overlap. We, as always, extend our appreciation to Mike for helping us through this transition time. It's been really beneficial. Monday, November 11th is Veterans Day, and as we do each year, there'll be a service, brief ceremony at the Veterans Park on Monday, November 11th at 11 a.m. And hopefully the weather will cooperate and we can stay outside. And this ceremony each year is hosted by the town's Veterans Department and American Legion Post 320. It is a really nice ceremony. It's brief. We invite families, anybody in the community to come out. Quite oftentimes there are many scouts there, which is really nice. And I think it's a very moving and meaningful to the veterans to have the town turn out and support them. So I encourage people to do so on November 11th. Lastly, tomorrow is the town's trick-or-treating at town offices. Most will run from 4 to 5:30, and those locations are Town Hall, the police headquarters, the main fire station, the Islington Fire Station, our main library, at the Recreation Department in the high school, at the Carby Street Municipal Office Building, and the Council on Aging will host from 3 to 4 p.m. So anyone who wants to bring their kids out to the town offices should do so tomorrow, and it's an annual event and it's really quite nice. We have several meeting agenda items tonight, and I normally don't like to do this, but we're going to take at least one out of order and see how long that takes. If it doesn't take much time, we may take a second one out of order, but I'd like to start with the public hearing for Not Your Average Joes. Gentlemen, I believe you might be with them. If you can please come up to the table here. This is a public hearing that was posted to occur at 7:30, and that's how we post it. Sometimes they happen later. Our printed agenda says 8:35, but given the public posting said 7:30, we'll proceed. This is a public hearing for alcohol compliance violation. Could you identify yourselves for us, please?
Peter D'Amelio, CEO of Not Your Average Joe.
Hi, Peter.
Kevin Rieger, I'm the regional director.
Okay. And the manager is not here?
Michelle is not here because prior to this incident, we were transferring her to Warwick.
Okay.
And so she's going, she has 1 day left in this restaurant, so.
Okay, so you've got a new manager coming in?
Named Brian, yes, who's been with us for over 4 years, I believe, right now, who's quite gifted, so.
Okay, so we will proceed with this public hearing. What we have is a violation that occurred on October 4th. I believe that was a Friday. And this was a violation that was recorded by the Westwood Police Department, who did an alcohol compliance check. And unfortunately, Not Your Average Joe's failed that check that evening.
Correct.
There were other places of business that were also checked that evening that passed. This is something that when we had a violation during the summer, it was clear that the police department had put out notification that they would be doing this. So this is something that is known to occur occasionally, that the police department will do this. We have Sergeant Sicard here tonight, and thank you, Sergeant Sicard, for being here. If we have any questions, I assume we can direct them to you because this was under your guidance.
What did he should read into the record?
Oh, okay.
They waived.
You know, Paul, maybe you want to come over and be ready here with the microphone, because we'll ask you to read that. So there was a violation in that an underage operative was ID'd and yet still served. And Paul, you have a report from that evening. When we had the last violation, we did have it read into the records, so do you have that available to
I
you?
don't have Lieutenant Vincey's actual report of this is an overview report of the night and all the checks we did that night.
Okay, we have one that you sent to Chief Silva, so why don't you do that one if you would, please?
Sergeant Paul Sicard of the Police Department. This is a report that I submitted to Chief Silver on October 4th, 2019. Sir, on Friday evening, October 4th, 2019, Lieutenant Vincey and I conducted alcohol compliance checks as requested. I arranged for 2 underage operatives. One was 18 years old and one was 20 years old. I met them at the station. We went over the guidelines for conducting the checks. They each signed a copy of the guidelines stating that they understood them. They each filled out an operative data sheet. I made copies of their Massachusetts junior operators' driver's licenses. I took photos of them showing how they were dressed. They each took a portable breath test showing 0.00 blood alcohol content. They left any other IDs and their cash in the detective's office. They carried with them only their own driver's license, debit and credit cards, and $40 in cash that I provided to them. At the end of the night, they returned the $40 in cash and each again blew 00 on the PBT. We visited most of the licensed establishments with the following results.
You don't have to go through all the results,
Okay.
Paul.
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
So Paul, there's two people, 2 underage people with licenses. So when I read High Street Market, checked ID and denied 20-year-old, I'm to assume the 18-year-old didn't try.
Correct.
Okay. So not your average Joe's, checked ID but served 18-year-old. And then that 19911 OF is the police report number?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you know what the birth date said for the 18-year-old?
I don't have that with me here. It was an 18-year-old female.
Okay.
I can get it upstairs.
Okay, so then we have the police report. Thank you, Paul. And the police report indicates that, it says here, born in July of 2001, John, in the police report.
I have the report now.
And operative 2 said born in May of 1999.
Correct.
Okay, you have the report now. Okay, do you want to highlight from the report?
So this is from the report of Lieutenant Vincey on Saturday. No, I'm sorry, this is an older one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, I'll touch on it. On Friday, October 4th, I was conducting underage alcohol compliance checks with Sergeant Sicard. We were using 2 underage operatives for the compliance check. Operative 1 was 18 years old and born in July 2001. Operative 2, 20 years old, born in May 1999. Prior to conducting the checks, we met at the station, et cetera, with what Sergeant Sicard has already said. At approximately 1850 hours, Operative 1 went into Not Your Average Joe's, went to the bar and ordered a Bud Light. The bartender checked her ID and poured her the beer. Operative 1 then sent a text to Sergeant Sicard that she had been served, and it goes on to say that then Lieutenant Vincey entered the bar. Operative 1 pointed out the bartender. The bartender was asked to speak with and identified. I identified myself, and she said she had just served a minor, so it was acknowledged. And that she turned. Paul, do you have this in front of you?
Yes, I do.
There's a redacted thing. I asked to speak with blank, identified myself, and she said she had just served a minor. Blank said she checked her ID and that she turned 21 in May. So is that the bartender saying the operative turned 21 in May?
Correct.
I told bartender that the operative was only 18 and then asked the operative for her ID. I showed the ID to the bartender and she immediately realized her mistake. I gave the ID back to the operative, told her she was all set to leave and to wait outside, and I asked the bartender to have a manager come to the bar area so I could speak to them. The manager came to the bar, and I alerted her as to what happened. I told her that bartender looked at the operative's ID but did not realize she was only 18. The manager asked if the bartender could finish her shift, and I said she could do what she wanted as the manager. I advised both the bartender and the manager that a report would be completed and forwarded to the town. So that's the report. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we have that information. I guess at this point I'd like to turn it to you and ask for your comments.
There's nothing to dispute about that. Lynn, the bartender, carded the young woman, looked at it, read it incorrectly, and then went ahead and served her. So that report's 100% factual.
Okay,
There's nothing to dispute about that.
okay.
So, the only question that I have is there seems to be some, that happened. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Okay.
So,
All right. For us, it is a matter that, you already know. We take it very seriously,
as do we.
and we appreciate that. Guidance to us is that on a first violation, we can issue a warning, an hours restriction, and up to a 4-day suspension. And we have a recommendation from our Alcohol Review Committee. This board had a similar incident this summer and felt it was appropriate to give a 1-day suspension and hold 2 days in abeyance for the year following the incident.
So from October 4th, 2019 to October 4th,
Right.
2020.
Should no incident occur, that's expunged. Should something occur, that automatically will get imposed along with it being a second offense and further findings.
May I ask one question, though? In a letter dated June 21st to the general manager there from Karen Flynn, it congratulates us on having two, and then it says, in the past, your establishment had a close call. And in my opinion, a close call is not a violation.
It is not deemed to be a violation.
Right. So
Not by
then-
this board.
Okay. So this is our first-time violation,
Yes.
and that's the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
In doing this, we felt that a conversation that the town administrator and the police chief had with the business was an
With Michelle,
appropriate way to respond to what we do not consider a first offense. It was an educational opportunity,
Okay,
so this is a first offense
thank you.
by our standards.
So I have a couple of questions.
Sure, John.
My memory is with Del Frisco's that the bartender did not ask for an ID.
That's correct.
Right.
And we spent a lot of time with that hearing talking about how that was such an aggravating factor. Correct? That's my memory.
That was the
It was an
factor.
aggravating factor,
So
so.
I didn't
I think they asked for an ID in that instance as well, but.
But no.
No,
No.
they did not ask for
No.
an ID. So I don't view
We won't
this as-
rehear this.
I don't
That
view
one.
this as similar. I view this as very different. I also, my memory is, and my memory's not always so great, Del Frisco's had received an actual prior warning.
So
As did Not Your Average Shows.
if that.
Okay.
Okay,
So there's
A
similar.
warning, but not as an offense.
Okay, so
Right.
that, so a verbal warning
A verbal
is
warning.
equally as good, that there was no documentation about the warning whatsoever.
I don't know if there was no.
I don't think
not-
they're similarly situated. That's- I guess
They were,
that's-
So I have
it-
no
the
documentation.
first instance was,
Your manager was.
Yeah.
and we remain consistent. A couple years ago, we implemented a policy of going back every 6 months or so.
Yeah,
And that
which
verified.
we support.
And the whole effort is being done on a regional basis with Norwood, Dedham, and Needham.
Yeah,
In the instances where we found what one would term as a violation, we then sat down with the appropriate folks and alerted them to the fact that they did not follow policy in the way they should have. We were treating it as a warning. We were giving them a verbal understanding of why we were doing it, what the consequences would be should we come back and there be a subsequent.
okay.
And
So
so-
just from where I sit, and I'm appreciative of everything, as a new CEO coming in and looking at everything, there's no documentation anywhere about this conversation. And so I don't know if that's my fault, I don't know if that's someone else's fault, but the reality of it is, when made aware of this incident, we immediately terminated the bartender. Every month we send out to the entire company, remember to ID, look at it this way. We do tips training. We've been open for almost 4 years and have had a warning. And this, in my humble opinion, I see this as not even comparative to what happened at Del Frisco's. So that's all I'm here to take
Sounds
the,
like, yeah.
No, I'm kind of with you. I mean,
Hold on a
let me say a
second.
couple of things. From this side of the table and your side of the table, this is probably the least enjoyable task.
Yeah, no, listen.
But we just, we need to get through it. But I think it is a public hearing.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect your income. It affects, the economy of your employees. It affects the safety of the town. So I just think facts are really important.
Yeah.
So if you came every month, you'd say, I'm usually very deferential to our Alcohol Review Commission. I read this, though, and I just feel like the Alcohol Review Commission has come to the conclusion that these are two similarly situated situations, and ergo the same the same punishment applies. And I don't think that's the case. So I guess I need someone to take me through the Del Frisco's sequence, and then we go through this sequence.
Okay.
Is that possible?
I'm a little concerned about rehearing Del Frisco's with
Yeah.
them not being
I'm
here.
just asking for the facts.
I'm going to turn to Mr. Miller, our special counsel on alcohol matters. Do you have anything you would like to say at this point? You don't have to.
Well, Del Frisco's is over and done. I mean, the facts were very similar.
There was no IDing of,
no idea.
There was no idea. So I don't agree. It's very similar, I guess.
oh, Steve, if you speak, you've got to come up to the microphone,
Sorry.
only because it doesn't pick up on the
Television.
recording.
So in this instance, even though the ID was checked, it was a junior ID.
Which looks different.
And,
get it,
and which is totally different. And that's, I know that's something they really focus on in tips training, and I know Not Your Average Joe's is a very fine company that really pays attention to it, but that in one case you didn't have the ID checked, in the other case you had a junior ID that was used.
Right, and so I think, just as a matter of administrative law, I think when you look at how a body is going to treat people, you look at the actual circumstances. And I remember asking you at the Del Frisco's hearing if we could use the fact that an ID wasn't even asked for as an aggravating factor. I don't know if you remember that. And the answer was yes. So all I'm saying is here, if that was an aggravating factor in that circumstance, and here the ID was actually asked for, I just don't know that I agree that the same outcome applies.
Okay.
And I may be in the minority.
Worse? I mean, John, again, I'm just trying to figure out your logic. Is it worse, or is it,
Well, to not ask at all, I think is the worst.
I see, okay.
I mean, I think it's a Friday night, it was busy, the person made a mistake. He without sin cast the first stone, I guess. I think there's something that applies here. But again, my memory is that we were all in agreement that not asking was an aggravating factor. And in this case, that aggravating factor is absent.
Okay.
Honestly, to me, it didn't matter. The result is the same. Whether you ask or you don't ask, you're still serving a minor. That's the bottom line.
Well, that
Well,
wasn't,
one
Sir-
is an egregious not doing your job, the other's not doing math. So
Well, and not seeing a difference in an
Right,
ID
right.
for all.
Well, doesn't the junior ID, you can be 21 for a couple of months with that ID.
Yes,
All-
but
Yes.
only 3.
So therefore, the shape of the idea has no bearing.
right.
It's
Well-
just a simple math problem.
Well, it's the big
Well,
bold
math
red
does-
letters that says
Let's
not
start.
valid until, not 21 until.
Right, she made a mistake, but it's not because of the shape of the license.
Paul?
Well, the shape of the license should be the first clue that,
It
we
should
need
be
to
the
look
first
closer.
clue.
But math isn't needed at all. It says right on the license in red letters, under 21 until.
Until.
Right, she made a
So-
mistake. She thought that meant 21, not 18. So we did it. There's no arguing
Right.
that whatsoever.
Right, you don't
Okay.
have to do math. I just
Yeah,
wanted to be
it's-
clear on that.
Yeah, I mean, we did it. I just want a fair thing, and that's that. We did it. We're responded to it. We've upped our diligence even more, if that's possible. And
That's what
I
ends up happening.
think a
Yeah.
closure is unwarranted.
It's not a closure. We stopped alcohol for one day. That's what we did. We let the restaurant stay open. They just could not serve alcohol for one
Do
day.
you
this
have a re-
puts you in a very awkward
It's
system.
okay that you have a
I
different point
understand.
of view. Do you have a recommendation? An alternative recommendation? I just would like to.
Well, I think a formal warning with a lack of, I call it a closure. I mean, I'm sure we won't go into how much revenue you get from the alcohol. I would hold that in abeyance for a year.
Okay, that's your recommendation. Nora, you look like you might want to say something? Or are you just looking at me? Okay. Okay, just checking. I have to open it up to the public. Is there anybody who wants to comment? Okay. What would you like to do? Anybody want to make a motion? I mean, I hear you. I actually thought about it the same way Mr. Hickey's commenting, that it isn't the same. It's not the same sequence of events, but the same outcome occurred, that
And
there was going to be
please don't-
service to somebody underage.
Yeah, please don't take my pushing back as a lack of concern or ownership.
I don't.
This is our problem.
I don't.
to
We
fix.
we are setting precedent, because for us, we have for a long time, it was a dry town. Then we became
Yes.
a wet town just for restaurants. And then we went to retail, and then we had a large growth in restaurants. And every step along the way, we've consistently said, take this license very seriously. We don't want to see you back here for the wrong reason. We only want to see you back here to renew it.
No, I applaud it. I've been
And
doing
that's,
this for
you
30
know,
years.
that's our approach. And the other violation was extremely concerning, but this one still, I mean, it's still concerning to me. It still led to service of a minor.
Absolutely.
One thing we did last time, and I think was appropriate in consideration of it being a first offense with the other party, is that we enforce the suspension of alcohol service on a Monday night, trying to find the least impactful for a first violation. And that's what I would recommend we do again. And we actually were even accommodating on which Monday it was so that we didn't impact what might have been a private party. So we really aren't trying to be excessively punitive. We need to enforce. So I'm looking for a motion.
I think consistency is important. So I move that we treat this as we did the others, and that you have a one-day suspension of the alcohol license. And the 2 days will be held in abeyance for a year.
From the date of
From the date of the violation. The other thing to note, if there is a second violation, it'll be automatic on Friday and Saturday following the violation.
Yeah, I read that.
And so that's my motion.
No second? Okay, I will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. So you have a 2-1 vote. So you will have the one-day suspension. And
Can I just clarification? One day, you said the other group had Monday night. Are you considering?
It was the whole day.
It was the whole day.
Yeah, it is
the whole
So
day.
Monday night was not.
Yeah.
It was the whole day.
We
And-
would
and-
advise you to contact the police chief to work out the details on the Monday night that you choose, so that they can come down and verify that
That
you
we're not
followed
certain.
it, and have a patrol officer go by, make sure, and at closing, come by and see you again.
And I know you take it seriously, and I appreciate, the respect you're showing to the process. Please, when your new manager, go through that paperwork to change the manager of
Yeah, she already
operation.
started.
And bring that person in. We'll be happy to welcome them. I will leave it with this. We're very happy you're here in Westwood. We think it is a great business, and we need to make sure that this aspect of it is
Yeah, we
handled.
love Westwood, and I am so really disappointed in our team. However, we have a lot of good things in place, and we will continue to
Good.
do them. Not to press my luck, if I chose to close completely on that Monday to do training, is that in line with
Yes. Yeah.
what you want?
That's your choice.
Oh,
That's your choice,
absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
And-
If you want to turn it into a positive that way, which
Yeah.
I think it is, yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
it's really hard, to do this, and we don't like to close businesses, but
Oh, no, you don't.
we have to be consistent. I think it's more important to be consistent
Listen, I
across the board.
appreciate you bringing it up. I appreciate what you said.
They're being
Um,
inconsistently consistent, I
I
guess.
Okay,
think,
you made your
I
point.
think you
Made your
guys made a
point.
fair decision, and we're going to
Made your
abide
point.
by it and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you.
you.
Have a good
All
day.
right. Good night. Do I
That's
dare,
it.
do I dare go the Sheehan thing, get that done?
Mr. Miller, always a pleasure.
Get that?
Although, when you come here, it's not usually for pleasurable business.
Thank you, Steve.
I know.
Okay, we're going, Pam, I'm very sorry, you can get mad at me tomorrow.
Steve, no.
We're going to take the school zone for Sheehan School next. We have Sergeant's card here, and I do believe that from a length of,
Gonna join us at the table.
who is?
Karen Albers, I think was pushing this. Come on, Karen. come on up.
PH,
Hi, Karen.
PH,
Good to know you. Paul, why don't you take a front and center seat? And the reason I'm calling it my phone is I got some
Paul, Karen, Paul.
decoding here. Okay, I just want to, there's some terminology that was
Okay.
used, and I want to get it right. Okay, so next on our agenda, we've moved up, is the request for a school zone in the Sheehan School area along High Street. Believe it or not, there isn't one there. There is one on Pond Street, and this request comes to us with a recommendation from Sergeant Sicard. Excuse me. There's a request to add a zone, and it has been checked out that this does indeed qualify to have a designated school zone, as the school abuts the roadway, High Street, and there's a crosswalk utilized by children to access the school across High Street. As I already mentioned, Pond Street has a school zone already in place. The school zone speeds are established under the Massachusetts Amendments to, Mike has given me what this is known as, Massachusetts Uniform Traffic Control Devices, Section 7E-3, and they are set at 20 miles per hour in school zones. So there's governing law to this, and the school zone speed limit signs would be used clearly stating times of day or messaging stating when students are present, or a flashing yellow light. So, Sergeant Sicard, what do you recommend for the best option that we consider here tonight?
Personally, I feel the flashing lights, although more expensive, are the best option for a number of reasons. Number of towns around us have just the static signs without the flashing lights, and there's a lot on the sign to read to begin with. So you have to get all the way down to the bottom
On High
to
Street
read
would
what signs, you know, what times the school zone applies. The other option is when children are present, and that's very vague. And especially for this particular crossing, the kids come out from the playground right at the crossing.
Yeah.
So somebody coming down 109 could see no children
Yeah.
until the student steps out either from Mill Street or from the playground. And
Yeah.
by that time, it's too late to slow down.
Okay.
And you really can't hold
Yeah,
them
I hear you.
responsible for it. So I would go with, to start with, if this flashing lights are too expensive to start, I would go with a static sign that lists the times. And then, you know, possibly upgrade to the flashing lights.
The one on Gay Street for Hanlon is not, it's a flashing light,
Correct.
and that's effective?
Yes. When I
Easier
started,
to enforce?
when I started as a safety officer, they used to leave them on all day.
Yeah, that's,
And they
That
lose,
becomes
they lose their
frustrating.
effectiveness. They definitely lose their effectiveness. And the manual actually requires that they only be on while the kids are going to and from school.
which makes more
So
sense.
the other advantage of the flashing lights is you can program them for the early release Wednesdays as well. Whereas a static sign, you know, if you just added, you know, every other Wednesday, you know, this time to this time, would make it a little too impossible to read any of it.
Mike, where would the funding for this come from?
I checked with DPW, they would take the funding out of their, find the funding within their budget.
Okay,
for
so we
signs.
can do it within.
There isn't any state program on this, Mike? I'll look into that.
Yeah, well, if there is something, I will check on that.
I will.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything, since you were
I
an advocate?
appreciate that you considering it, though.
Okay.
I've definitely seen children come out from school there. Unfortunately, the basketball court is right there, so the ball goes stray, and then they've gone towards the road. And especially when we had all the construction with the sidewalks, which was wonderful that those were added. It was just that much more. People couldn't go down Pond Street, so that many more people were on 109. It was just that much more chaotic in the morning.
Well, I think you're calling out a definite need, so that's very, very appreciative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any
Appreciate that.
questions, comments?
Paul,
Okay, I
over
think this
at-
is pretty
Over at
straightforward.
the Oakdale School in Dedham, they have one of these signs, and then they have a sign that tells you your speed.
Yes.
I
Is
think
that
we have that now in
potential?
front of Hanlon.
Is there, I don't know, is there one there now that gives you the speed?
There isn't one there now. They can be added. If you do it at the time of construction, it's a little better because you're not
Okay.
going back retrofitting.
Right.
And I think it can be included with the solar power that they're
Right.
looking at for this.
Yeah, okay. I just know it reminds
Oh,
me to
yes.
slow down. you
It
know,
definitely
so-
does.
And
For
I
no-
think the police officer uses it to pull people over.
For another day, but in Rhode Island, in Pawtucket, they now have school zones on the main road and speed sensors. So they don't need any police out there. They're sending out tickets.
Yes.
I was duly warned.
Yes, watch they have a TV show about it, and unfortunately, they're getting
This is-
thousands of appeals.
This is new in Pawtucket. I've got to imagine the expense of that.
Yeah,
is-
Providence has been doing it, and it's,
Providence has been doing it, yeah, now Pawtucket's joined in. I think this is, we'll put it under the category of a slam dunk, so
Great,
I'll
thank
take a
you very
motion.
much.
So I move
really
that
appreciate that.
Select Board vote to add a school zone to Route 109 crosswalk area adjacent to the Sheehan School for the installation of the proper signage designating an area of a school zone with the flashing, blinking yellow light.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Good job.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks for
you.
pushing it, Karen.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Okay. All right, now we'll get back on track, and I beg forgiveness from all the people who are here for the budget discussion, but thank you. Pam, please join us. Anybody else you want to have join you at the table, or are we going to?
You're
I think they're
gonna be
going
the
to
Lone
stay
Ranger?
right here.
Come on, Laura.
We'll point out, we have Kathy Foley, Maria Leary, and Laura Bucari from Town Hall, as well as Lemma Jean-Baptiste from the School Finance Office.
Welcome. So we're doing this a little bit differently this year. We're going to have our kickoff for the budget discussion be actually an overview budget. We will be touching on capital more detailed at our November 18th meeting, but we'll also be looking at our long-term forecasting, which we always do, but not like this all before the select board. We did have the long-range financial planning committee that many of the discussions took place, but it started becoming very repetitive and in some cases coming to this board somewhat late in the process. So we want to have it all here. We'll still go through many discussions over time, but tonight's the kickoff, and we've actually allocated an hour for this discussion. If we don't need it all, that's fine, but we're not squeezing Pam on the time to keep it to 15 minutes or less. So it's a chance for us to have some discussion. We've invited Finance Commission, School Committee, Long Range Financial Planning, whomever wanted to come tonight. But more importantly, Westwood Media Center, or most importantly, has agreed to then edit this portion of the meeting to make it a link. Not edit it, but cut it out from the rest of the meeting so that we can have this as a link and easier for people to go straight to the subject matter on what we discussed tonight and at future meetings. So we really appreciate their ability and willingness to do that for us. I know some of them around. Thank you, Westwood Media Center. Okay, so I'm going to turn it. Great job. Peanut gallery. I think it's important, so we're really glad we can do that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, but at some point I'd like this to be very interactive,
Yes.
so why don't you guide us?
Absolutely. And I do just want to mention that you mentioned the other boards that were invited, and while some of those members are not here tonight, they know that they can watch this on the Westwood Media, and they intend to do so, as well as we'll send out the material to them.
Great. Okay.
So, again, as you mentioned, this is something we do each year at this time to make sure we're going through our financial information before you start moving forward in the budget development for fiscal 2021 budget. So at the meeting tonight, we're going to go through kind of our prior fiscal year, FY19 year-end results. We're going to look at the status of where we are with a few key financial items and talk about how those impact the FY21 budget development. And then we're looking at a very early preview of the FY21 budget. At your next meeting, you're scheduled to have the tax classification hearing, where the select board will approve the tax shift between commercial and residential development. At that meeting, we'd be reviewing the residential tax bill, we'd be updating on our actual new growth in the current year, FY20, would be updating on the university station revenue and where that stands. I just want to point that out because you will not see tonight's slides on our average tax bill, university station revenue, or our actual new growth. And those are certainly important considerations as we look at our financials and look at FY21. We don't have all of that information tonight. So you'll see those at your meeting in November. As well as in November, we'll start to review the capital budget requests with the select board. We actually will schedule departments to come into you and go through some of the capital that will be requested for FY21. And then in your December and January meetings, as always, you'd continue to refine the budget development, looking further at capital, looking at the municipal operating budget. We'll continue to update and refine our revenue and expense projections, continue that through January. And then on February 1, we're producing the proposed budget book at that point in time, and then that's what gets sent out to the Finance and Warrant Commission and starts their review process. So tonight we're going to start off with fiscal year in review. And I do just want to make sure to thank all of our financial staff for the work they do to help us close out the year. We had a very smooth year-end close. There is quite a bit of compliance reporting that we have to do both with Department of Revenue and Department of Education. So I'd like to thank the staff, and particularly the staff who's here tonight, who all have some major year-end reporting that they have to do. Our audit and year-end close went very smoothly this year. Our audit is completed. The audit committee will be coming into an upcoming meeting of the Select Board to go through that with you. So when we look at FY19, we start on the revenue side and look at how did our revenue come in. And the revenue came in quite fine, as it does each year. The pie chart shows our revenue for FY19, $99 million of revenue. The majority of that, 80%, is in our real estate taxes. All of that revenue on the tax side came in on target, $77 million collected, 99% of our collections on time by June 30th, with no issues. Our residents do a great job in paying their tax bills on time. Our tax collector and the staff in the collector and treasurer's office do a great job assisting taxpayers with their bills. We often speak about how our budget model, being funded by tax revenue for 80%, is a difficult model to work with as we try to budget forward. It's actually an easier model when we look on the collection side. Taxes simply have to be paid. The fact that 80% of our taxes, our revenue is taxes, it's really always makes for a smooth process. I just want to point out two items. Any past due taxes. As of June 30th, we have two accounts in total for past due. One is tax deferral. There was $455,000 on June 30th. That's a program that the state allows for eligible seniors to defer paying their taxes. They take a lien on their property. They can defer payment of their taxes until they sell their house. The 455 is kind of cumulative from all the years of people being in that program. You can see for prior years, we had 475, FY18, 495,000, FY17. Those numbers show that, we're not continuing to build this account. A couple of new people may come on each year, but a couple move off. It's kind of a rolling number. This is about the approximate amount we have each year. That's a very nice program for those that qualify for that. The second item is tax title. We had just over 600,000 in past due for tax title as of June 30th. Again, that's our cumulative number. We're billing almost $80 million a year. The 600,000 is not just from FY19, it's the cumulative of all past due tax title. Again, that compares quite favorably to FY18 and 17. Again, showing that a few new accounts come on each year, but a few are always rolling off. The treasurer, Gavin, and the treasurer's office work hard to work on the tax title and any past due. It's kind of always rolling. So we are in a really terrific position with our taxes. This is kind of a standard collection rate and activity that you would see for a suburban community who has the housing stock like we do with owner-occupied single-family homes. Looking at our next,
No,
Just-
no, I'm good.
okay.
I'm good. Thank you.
our next main revenue source is state aid. We took in $6.2 million in state aid in FY19. The bar chart shows our state aid each year for the last several years. And you can see by the graph, it's just been kind of very steady over the last couple of years. No real fluctuations, just very modest, minor increases each year. If we showed you a long-term look at our state aid, you would see something different. The town has experienced years that when the state budget has problems, we might see large fluctuations and decreases in state aid. We've not experienced that for a number of years. It's been very steady. We're now paid that revenue monthly. We've had no mid-year cuts or
How long has it
disruption.
been since we had that mid-year cut?
How long
15
it's
years?
been? I think that might have been
2009.
FY11 or so, yeah.
Yeah, as if it is in the fiscal crisis of 2009, 2011.
Yeah. So just so people know, mid-year, we did have cuts. We had to figure out where cash was going to come from, and one of the reasons we had a prior policy of capital coming back for a second approval was in the event we needed cash
Yes.
resources. We've done away with needing to do that because we've built up our reserves, our stabilization account, et cetera. So we're in just better financial and cash position than we were back when that
Yes, because mid-year cuts are very difficult to kind of
very
handle.
difficult. And I think the state realized that that was a really challenging.
And I think
thing to
that's
do
been
to
part of their
communities.
philosophy and kind of really only going with more moderate increases each year going forward. They're not kind of, trying to reach too high and provide increases only to have to pull back from us.
Right, and we don't rely on it as much as some communities. Some communities are heavily
Yes.
reliant on the state funding for their schools, for many budget items, and so we're lucky we don't have that reliance, but it
Yes.
still is
So it's about
very
6%
difficult
of
when
our
it-
aid for a large city in the Commonwealth, it might be 65, 70% of their
That's huge,
revenue.
yeah.
I just want to point out one item in green. We had budgeted at town meeting 6.2 million. We had a level funded budget. The actual final state budget was a little bit over that at 6.4 million. So the numbers we're showing on the bottom. We had additional Chapter 78 of 160,000, additional municipal aid of 20,000. So the final budget was 180,000 increase over the current year. We can use that number as our starting point when we start to develop the FY21 budget.
What level was that change made at? Was that at the governor's level, or did it happen before it got to the governor?
Governor.
That's what I thought. Did the governor make that
The
adjustment?
governor made that change, and normally we incorporate that change in the budget process. You'll recall
later.
this past spring, there was quite a bit of discussion on increasing the Chapter 70 and changing the Chapter 70 formula. And there was some discussion that that would have occurred for the FY20 budget. It did not. They're continuing to discuss that. So we did not pick up that increase as we normally might in the spring.
Okay.
And then just finally, our third revenue category is our local receipts. Revenue we collect at the local level, primarily our motor vehicle excise and building permit fees. So we had strong collections as we had in the prior year, 5.9 million in our total local receipts category. The prior year was 6.1. The revenue in FY19 exceeded our budget by 1.9 million. The prior year exceeded by 2.1. We've talked before that we are conservatively budgeting in this category, so we expect the revenue to come in over budget to those degrees that we just mentioned.
Can you comment on why you recommend and we concur to conservatively budget? I mean, what is the benefit of
Yes.
doing that?
So first of all, we collect whatever we collect. We're not losing revenue. We just are not budgeting and using that in our budget projections and spending the money. When the money comes in over budget, it flows into our free cash, which then we have in hand and know, and we apply in the future year. But the bar graph on the bottom shows the motor vehicle revenue collection for the last several years, 3.7 million. We've had just a little steady increase the last 2 years. This is a category that's that can fluctuate with the economy. This is a category that we took a major hit when we did have kind of the financial disruption in FY08, FY09. It's very hard if you build in and kind of try to capture revenue and then it's pulled back. That can be a big disruption to your budget.
Bless you.
So we have since that point kind of been conservative with the collection on the motor vehicle, the budgeting on the motor vehicle, gives us the ability to have a cushion if we saw an economic downturn, that we would not have to come in and change our operating budget at
But
that
you
time.
also look at trends during the year as we are in the budget process. We get that information regularly, right? I mean, we know as the year's going on now,
When we
what's
do our
happening in
monthly- yes.
FY20.
We're doing our monthly budget to actual. We're doing that on both the revenue and expense side, and
So
we're
if you
looking
saw
at
it
it.
trending down.
Yes.
Let's say we were in a 2007, 2008 mode, and it was trending down, you would pull back the projections for next year's budget
We
right
would know
away.
that, yes. The one thing with the motor vehicle is the main billing. We get the billing from the registry. We don't generate the billing file ourselves. The motor vehicle registry sends out to each community the billing information. We don't get the main one. You get one motor vehicle bill per calendar year. We don't get that till the January, February timeframe for that calendar year. So we often don't know that. We start out with an estimate in the budget. We kind of get firmed up on our collections not until February timeframe.
Okay.
But again, the one other item in there is the building permit revenue. That's also tied to the economy. That's been quite strong the last couple of years with all of the activity in town, new development or renovations. So that's come in quite nicely. So we've had strong collections as we have the last couple of years in the local receipts category. It is built conservatively to provide some cushion. Looking now on the expense side and how did we close out FY19, and I just want to quickly just look first at the snow and ice. budget because that has some impact what kind of year we had as far as what we have for turn back. So the graph on the top shows how much we spend each year in snow and ice collection, with our FY19 shown in the green bar, $538,000, which was a relatively minor winter for us. If you remember last winter, it was, we didn't have too much snow. We did have several major ice storms, but it was relatively minor compared to the 2 preceding years. So we spent approximately $538,000. Our budget was $450,000. It is the only account, as the board knows, that we're allowed to overspend our budget. No other account can we overspend what town meeting votes, but we can with snow and ice per the state rules. Well, our budget was $450,000. We did a $100,000 supplement at town meeting from the reserve account, so there was a small $12,000 balance returned. The budget was recently increased in recent years. Our current budget, $450,000. Up until FY08, our budget was $141,000 in that account. We were able to then increase it to $250,000, steadily increased it up to $450,000. Having a better budget to begin with puts less reliance on us having to use free cash at town meeting to cover snow and ice or to go to the reserve account. So with a little bit higher budget, and then if we get a more mild a year, you'll see a little bit higher turn back in the reserve accounts at the year end, and you'll see a little less use of free cash for snow and ice.
Do you see any reason at this point to change that $450,000 budget?
I don't think right now. I think that was a great move that the select board did to, bring that up, almost doubling it from the 250. This has given us a little bit extra cushion. We do have, additional free cash to utilize when we do need to transfer.
Okay.
So looking now at our overall close on the expense side. So our operating budget for FY19 was just over $86 million. We vote budgets at town meeting. If budgets are not used, they're returned or closed out at the end of the year. They cannot be carried forward into the next fiscal year. We had turn back of $1.4 million, or about 1.6%. And that's really in line with what prior years have been. 1.2% FY18, 1.3% FY17. The chart at the bottom shows the dollar amount turned back each year for the last several years. So this is really kind of a normal margin. The table on the right shows where that turn back is occurring by category. So in FY19, the turn back of 1.4 million, the $229,000 from the municipal budget, $850,000 from the benefits budget, $333,000 from the reserve account. You can see in comparing that to FY18, very standard. Most of the turn back we see each year is from the benefits and fixed cost account, and then the reserve account. And again, the reserve account is going to fluctuate depending how much we use for snow and ice. The benefits, it's about a 5% turn back each year, and it's simply how we have to budget for that category. We can have fluctuations on our benefits during the year. If new people come online and want to get on the health insurance, we have to have room to allow for that in the budgets. But then if it's not utilized, again, it closes out. So a normal turn back for FY19 in line with where it's been each year. When we combine the revenue turn back and the expense turn back, we then get our free cash certified. And free cash is a process in Massachusetts. The Department of Revenue kind of goes through your year-end reporting, determines in a sense what was your unallocated funds, both on the revenue and expense side. They go through a process of reviewing your balance sheet and checking things. Once they certify it, that revenue is available to be used in future years' budgets. So in a sense, it's the retained earnings left at the end of the year, and then you can go ahead and use those. It does require a vote at town meeting to utilize the funds.
Where did the term free cash
know.
come from, which is so poorly
poor
applied? You're saying it's essentially retained earnings. Many people who know financial statements can relate to retained earnings. Free cash conjures up something quite
Yes,
different.
It's not a great term, and the state kind of switched from free cash to unallocated fund balance. I'm not sure if that's any better. But so we try to say it's like retained earnings. One fiscal year closes. Everything in municipal county is kind of year by year. So we close out our revenue, close out the expenses, what's available, now you can use that in the next year. So when we talk about the number of free cash, it's one new number each year, not a cumulative number.
Right.
And you can see by the bar graph on the bottom, what's in blue is the amount certified each year, and the green is what we then spent or appropriated at town meeting. If you look to the far left of the graph, in those difficult years where we had the economy turned down, 09 and 10, we were using basically every dollar of free cash just to get through some difficult budget years. As conditions improved, we could see that we've been more disciplined, we're able to more meet our financial policy guidelines, we're not utilizing all of the free cash. So that means a couple of things, we're more in line with our financial policies, we also have a starting balance, so if you don't use all of your free cash, that's the starting balance that then your revenue over budget gets added to, any turnbacks from budget gets added to get your next number certified. So our amount certified was $6.6 million. Really pretty much in line with where we've been the last couple of years, 5.8, 5.9. Our financial policy says that we'd have approximately $3.3 million in unallocated, unappropriated free cash. So that gives us a healthy amount to utilize in our budget.
No need to change that policy, is there? The
No need to
3.3.
change the policy. But I'm going to show you on the next slide how we've utilized that policy. So this bar graph shows the target of the 3.3 million in the red line. And you can see in green would be our planned use as you start your FY21 budget. As we start the budget, we say, well, let's meet our policy and have 3.3 million unallocated. You can see in the blue is actuals from prior years. We're never quite fully meeting that policy, but we're close. So first of all, we should only use free cash for capital or other one-time uses. And we've been very disciplined in being able to do that. We fund all of our main capital articles from free cash. We then use additional free cash for other capital, snow and ice, as I mentioned, or other warrant articles. Some years there's other warrant articles before town meeting that require funding. So the policy is really just a guideline. It doesn't prevent the select board from doing additional items during the process.
Okay.
So that's really the look at FY19, in good shape. Again, a smooth close, a consistent close with what we've had in other years. And now we just go through some key financial areas. Yep.
Pause. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Because we're going to keep going. There's a lot of information here. Is there anybody who wants to interject? Mrs. Delisle, you may, but you need a microphone. That's the price you pay.
I would just like to say, having been on long-range planning and being involved in setting those financial targets, I'm glad to see we finally met the free cash target. I think that's the only one we were never quite meeting, and so I would really encourage us to not go below. If you're going to go below that 3.3, then we might as well then change that target, but keep with it for this year, for going forward, if we can achieve it finally.
Thank you. Okay, proceed.
We're going to look at some key financial areas, update the board on where we stand with those, and then mention if that impacts at all the FY21 budget development. So a number of different areas, and I'll move quickly through this. But the first one is our stabilization fund. This is the town's main savings account. It's one of the key items for our bond rating, our credit rating, and we are a AAA rated community, which really helps when we go out to borrow money, helps us get the best rates and save money on interest. So by our financial targets, we should have about $3.4 million in this account. And shown in the green bar right now, we have about 3.3. So we are really on target with this account. It's kind of built up. You can see on the left side of the bar, this is the balance in the account each year, this bar graph. We built this up with one-time revenue. We've just done a small transfer each year for a number of years from free cash just to stay on track. And that's all you would need to continue to do in FY21. Just do the $125,000 transfer. No need to do more. But this is the account. We don't really look to spend this money. This would be what would get us through any kind of economic downturn, reduction in state aid, that type of thing.
So I think that makes sense. This one I would say, not necessarily next year, but I think we should be looking out a little bit further and looking at whether or not to raise that level. I remember back in 2008 or 2005 when we had 25,000 in this stabilization account, or 100,000. It was bad days.
Yeah.
And this is great, but as our budget grows, as the town has advanced, I don't want to think that this is the cap forever. So I think we should be looking at a point in time when it's appropriate to
Yes.
increase it.
And years ago, and Mike will remember, we had bad days where we were draining from the stabilization.
The early years.
Yeah.
Yes, so.
We're very fortunate to be at this level. I
Yes.
just think
And it's
we
been
may
a
wanna grow.
steady progression and steady attention to it. And again, it's an important component of our credit rating. So we're not just doing it just to, kind of have money set aside. It is very helpful
Good.
for that. Quickly, a similar look at the OPEB liability, something that we've talked about for a number of years. This is a long-term liability to provide the town's share of benefit costs for retirees, much like a pension liability. The bar graph in this chart shows our annual appropriation towards the liability. And you can see by the chart that we started out quite small. We were able to build up at a couple of points during budget development in a couple of years where we had some savings in healthcare costs and changes in healthcare plan. We were able to build up an appropriation, the appropriation in the current year's budget, $1.44 million. That is really close to the target of what we need to do. So that's terrific. And that has become another area that the credit rating agencies really look at, is what's your compliance with OPEB, what's your plan? We currently are on a funding plan, and have been for the last couple of years, where we increased that annual contribution by $25,000 a year. So really not too significant an increase, just to stay on track. And I would recommend that that's our continued funding plan for the FY21 budget. We are required to have the liability updated every other year, and that's where we're just showing you some numbers in that chart on the right. Our next study is currently being done. It's the liability as of June 30th, 2019. The study will be completed in February 2020. We would just point out that we would utilize that information to make any recommendations if needed for changing our funding plan for FY22 and beyond. Not for the FY21 budget. It won't be done in time. So we would increase our budget by $25,000 for FY21, and that'll keep us in very good shape with this liability. The next two slides look at the town's debt. The graph at the bottom shows the total debt outstanding at fiscal year end for a number of years. So in FY19, shown in green, the town has $40 million in debt outstanding. As I mentioned, we have a very strong credit rating, a AAA rating. The last several years have been excellent interest rate environment for the town to borrow money. We did have some large bond sales in FY15 and 16, $10 million in 2015, $16 million in 2016. Those were some of the bonds we issued for the new police station that we're in, the new fire station, as well as some other smaller items. When you look at the bar graph, you can see that when we took on those new debt, our overall debt did accelerate at that point, but then came back down quite quickly. We have not issued any new debt for the last 3 years, as well as some of the debt that was issued, particularly for the fire station, replaced debt that was ending. So when the new fire station came online, was right in line when we stopped the debt payments for the Carby Street Municipal Building. So when new debt is issued, when old debt is rolling off, it helps keep the overall debt steady. We do have 3 pieces of debt that have been authorized by town meeting but not yet issued. So the treasurer has not issued the debt yet for this. And that includes $1.75 million for the first phase of the school project with MSBA, $3.5 million for the redevelopment in the Islington Center and the moving and redevelopment of the Wentworth Library, and $900,000, which was the first piece of the road bond that was approved at the May town meeting. So 6 $0.1 million that we will need to go out and issue. I will point out that the top two numbers, the 175 and the 3.5, are kind of the gross appropriations. They both have revenue estimates that would come in against those, and we would only be borrowing the net amount. So for the 1.75 for the school appropriation, some of that will be subsidized by the MSBA, and we would only be borrowing for the net amount.
But in the case of the school project, we're actually spending money on that now. We just haven't put a bond against it, right? We're funding.
So those are funded. As soon as town meeting votes, the authorization, the departments can go forward. It just happens that both of those amounts, really the funding is only starting now. As the schools get underway, they've really only recently been spending against that.
Right.
Similar to the Wentworth Library, they were both done in 2018, the approval process, but the actual spending is only occurring now. So the treasurer doesn't need to borrow until the actual spending occurs. But he will be taking action on these items during this year. He most likely will be issuing a short-term ban.
That's what I was wondering,
Yes,
too.
and not issue a long-term bond until further in the year he sees what other new debt might be contemplated for this May town meeting.
And then package them all
package it.
together in one
It's
bond.
costly and time-consuming for the town to go out and issue long-term bonds, so he can issue a short-term ban to cover the funding and then roll that all into.
For
a
the
long-term
audience,
bond.
can you say what a ban is, please?
So the ban, is a bond anticipation note.
it's
So
a
when we go
short-term
out for a
borrowing.
bond, it's like going for a mortgage. It's a long-term, we're committing the town to a long-term 20, 30-year process. The ban or anticipation is a short-term note that can be for a 6-month, 1-year period. He could roll that if he needed to, and then at a certain point, we package it up and put it all into a long-term
I
process.
believe our experience is Westwood's bans or bonds, whichever, are highly desirable in the investment marketplace. We're able to get funding for those very easily.
Highly desirable. And this is something that residents may not understand how we don't go to the bank and borrow money, we have to issue a bond. So investors have to purchase a bond from the town of Westwood, give us the money up front, and we enter
So
into a
people in their
repayment
investment
period.
portfolios look for municipal investments all the time, and Westwood is part of that, and they're
And municipal
AAA bond
investment-
rating is when it
AAA
pays
bond
off.
rating, tax exempt, so a lot of investors want that in their portfolio.
Right.
And Westwood's debt is all good debt. We're building new buildings. We're purchasing land. We're improving long-term assets. We typically, when you look at our capital articles, are paying for smaller operating equipment on a cash basis, out of free cash. So we're not borrowing for police vehicles or equipment that will be outdated. We're doing our long-term debt for long-term assets, and that's very desirable.
And I think the bond rating translates into reliability of us paying on our obligations. Highly reliable.
Highly reliable.
Is the 900 been issued, or is
It has not been issued.
Okay.
So again, he will, the spending now has just been occurring. The treasurer will, need to look at that now, and again, most probably will do a short term, because we typically do a short term if we know other debt is on the horizon, and I think there will be other things coming forward.
So is this, so the work that was just completed on 109, is this 900 to pay for that, or is this additional
No, this is to
Work-
pay for what's already been done.
work that's been done?
That's right.
Okay.
That work that's been done. That was the first piece, if you recall, there was a $4.9 million bond that had been talked about.
We did one.
The first piece, that 900,000, was approved at town meeting. So this piece would be for that. And we did for that piece, when we pulled in that 900,000 into the budget, we do in our current year budget, debt budget, have the funds to pay for that debt service. The other two pieces where we didn't know the timing or whatever, those would come into future budgets. Our current debt budget accommodates the long-term issuance of that $900,000 piece. Just one other slide on debt. When we say we have $40 million outstanding, this looks at how is that being paid off going forward. And there's two components of our debt service. There's debt that was approved exempt debt, which is exempt debt that's approved outside the provisions of Prop 2.5. So a vote was taken at a town meeting and an election to let the town pay for the debt service outside of 2.5. That means the exact principal and interest each year is raised outside of 2.5, and when the debt ends, our ability to tax for that ends. The top chart here shows the amount we're paying, a net amount, for exempt debt. We only have 2 projects right now that were approved as exempt debt, the high school project and the library. So in FY20 in green, those amounts are $1.3 million total. That green is net of MSBA reimbursement that we received for the high school project. So our exempt debt going forward has a natural decline of about $100,000 a year. And then we're pointing out that just in 3 short years, we will make our last payment on the high school.
On the new high school.
On a new high school, and we say this a lot, but I think it's important, that was a 20-year bond. It was the largest bond the town ever issued. We are near the end of the payments for that. That's going to roll quite nicely with the schools as they move forward with their next project, the elementary school project. We'll be able to say to the community, we've completed payments for the high school. So you can see from 23 to 24, there's a $400,000 drop-off that's directly related to the high school debt ending.
And when does the library?
And the library ends, I believe it's 32. I think we issued that in 2012 for a 20-year bond. So we're
But it
moving
was
along
a
on
much
that.
smaller project and it.
Much smaller project.
Yeah.
The chart at the bottom just shows that same debt schedule for our debt within 2.5. So again, in the green in FY20 current year, we paid $3.2 million in debt, which is well within our guidelines, well within the guidelines for what we can have outstanding in debt. That again has a natural decline, and the next one that drops off there is in fiscal 22, a $4 million DPW bond that we had issued for equipment and some road work ends. And again, that would provide space to take on another bond to replace that. So always when we look at debt authorizations as part of the budget, we look to see is there debt rolling off that new debt can replace before we look to add additional dollars within the budget. Just quickly looking at the meals and hotel tax revenue. And we have all of up on top, just more for the fixed slides, the discussion of when we adopted that, what that revenue is. But essentially, the town accepted the local option for the meals and hotel tax revenue, something that was offered by the state. The money comes in. Our town meeting said, set up that that goes into a separate fund that only town meeting future vote to utilize can use that fund. So the graph on the left is the annual meals tax revenue, and on the right is the hotel tax revenue. So you can see from when they started, there was a little bit of slow buildup to this revenue. We did close out FY19. We're close to $800,000 a year in the combined revenue. And the little table at the bottom, we're showing you the most recent revenue. We get the revenue quarterly. The state collects the tax and then sends it to us. So our September payment was $114,000 for meals, $94,000 for hotels. So again, on track for just over $200,000 a quarter.
And PM, with the meals and tax, we have historically looked not to build it into a reserve, but to use it for a tactical purpose, to take care of a particular issue.
Yes.
Are we aligned on that again
Yes,
this
so
year?
this next slide, right, what you're asking, shows the balance in the account and what we've used it for. So in the early years, we did wait to see that revenue come online to see how much it would be and let it build up a bit. But then once it became a steady source, the town meeting has used it to fund capital items, additional projects. So we've done that twice, beginning in the May 18 town meeting, $432,000, and then at the most recent May 19 town meeting, $515,000. They've been used for projects, school, field, the pool, projects that would be hard for us to fit within our ongoing capital budgets, projects that reach the whole community. This has made a tremendous difference to be able to utilize this money towards those projects.
We've talked about, and I think maybe you'll be getting to it, about creating a warrant article that allows us to put some in capital stabilization account or some kind of natural funding mechanism that once, if approved, it will do
Yes.
it each year.
So right now, the town meeting article where we set up this account to hold this money puts 100% of the meals and hotel tax revenue into this account. Another town meeting could change that and put, say, 75% of the money into this account and 25% into our longer-term capital funding. And we're going to show you that account in an upcoming slide. But there are options. It takes a town meeting vote to change that revenue structure. If you change it at town meeting, then the revenue just goes to where you've allocated it. If not, you would need at town meeting each year to kind of vote the money from one place to another.
But no matter what, to spend it, we still need town meeting approval,
And you need a 2/3 vote at town meeting to spend it.
no matter what.
So we ended June 30th.
Yep.
After we utilized funds at the May town meeting, we ended with just over $1 million in this account. We did now have received that September 30th, the first quarter allocation of about $200,000. So currently, we have $1.2 million in the account. And so this is a source we'll be talking with you about as you go through your budget development in FY21, about utilizing this funding for additional capital projects. And talking about it, it's a desire to change that allocation going forward. But it's been tremendous revenue. We'll just remind our residents, primarily this is coming from University Station, from the hotels and restaurants there. So it's kind of an added revenue beyond the taxes that project brings. And the town really moved towards adopting this revenue because our residents were paying that in other similar places. If you go to Legacy Place, you're paying that meals tax to Dedham. If you go to Patriots Place, you're paying that to Foxborough. So the town adopted this so that we are capturing the revenue from other people coming to University Station. So it's been a nice source to date and will be even more important going forward. So it is the next slide that you just mentioned, Nancy, on the capital fund. So town meeting in previous years, way back in 2009, had set up a capital stabilization fund, an account to try to save towards longer-term capital needs. So if we knew a major capital project was coming, that we could save towards that each year instead of trying to fund that all at once. As you can see from the graph, we really didn't have money for many years to put into the account. And we really have only funded this one time. In FY16, we had a one-time appropriation into the account, and the balance was $1.7 million. In the 2016 annual town meeting, we used $650,000 of this account to do the replacement of the high school turf, track and field. And we really have not had any activity with this account since. We've not put in any additional money. The current balance right now is $1.5 billion. So this account does earn interest on the money in the account. That's why there's a small increase each year.
But Pam, you said we didn't put any in, but it went from $1 million in FY 2017 to almost $1.5 million in 2018. So what was that increase?
I apologize. We had another one-time appropriation in FY18. We had a bond sale that year, and we took the premium money. Yes. So we should have another little error there under 18.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
But otherwise, unless we are proactively doing something,
It doesn't
we don't
increase.
have a natural funding mechanism.
We don't have a natural funding into this. So there's 1.5 currently. I will just point out, it'll be something you'll discuss going forward. The second turf field that the town has, the practice field in the back, is
Needs to
now
be replaced.
This may be a funding source for that, as it was for the main.
We'll hear about that in November.
And you'll hear about that in November, about the project,
Yeah.
and then we can talk about this as a funding source.
Okay, great.
The next two slides, not to look at, and I know they're not readable on the screen here, but these
There'll be a
are,
test at the end of this session, everybody, so.
we do self-report
important.
where we stand against our financial policies each year. So this is the most up-to-date information on each of the financial policies we have. Where does the town stand? Are we meeting compliance with that policy? We do post these on our website, as well as we include these in the town meeting book
Oh,
each year.
that goes out from Finance Commission, it's in that one.
Yes.
Yep.
So we do, we don't just have the policies kind of away in a drawer. We are looking at monitoring what is our compliance with the policies. We do send this document to the rating agencies. They love it, that we're reporting. And really, you can see we've got a lot of check marks saying, yes, we're meeting target. The only one we really had not met for a number of years, and we've had tremendous improvement, is in the capital budget. We had policies on how much to reinvest each year in the capital stock, and we've done much better the last couple of years. So the policies and the status kind of ends our look at,
Okay, I'm going to the microphone if you have a comment or a question, please.
No, of course it's a comment, not a
Okay.
question. On the meals tax, I really want to encourage us to set up a policy. We talked about a policy in the past about what we were doing with the money and not spending it every year, and to set up some consistent amount that goes into capital stabilization, because we know there are those turf fields have to get replaced every 10 years. There's also a major, I remember at the time we did the high school, there was a major, I think it's the filtration system or something with the pool, that it's a rather large capital expense that we're probably not saving for. That's a perfect example. So we need to make sure that we're putting some money from that, from the meals tax. I hate to see it kind of going every year to some big project, and we have things that we know we have that are big projects.
Well, I think what we have to do is discuss how to do it, not,
Yeah.
I don't think we have the.
But, I mean, I definitely feel
Okay.
like, I know that, you know, on the meals tax, there is some economic variability with it.
For the
We haven't
record,
gone
could you
through.
identify yourself so we all know who you are?
Barbara
Barbara.
Delisle, Chair FinCom.
Thank you.
And just to, you know, we know that there can be some economic impact of the meals tax, and we haven't had an economic downturn since we've been collecting meals tax. So I just would like to see that, you know, that at least we take something off the top to begin with on a consistent basis. It's more consistent with all our other guidelines that we do.
I would just
Thanks for your input.
follow up with one comment
Yeah.
there, that we make sure to use the meals tax for one-time projects, for capital. From the beginning, with the select board authorized the meals tax to go on the warrant, we said we would never use that for operating budget or ongoing issues, because yes, it is a revenue that can fluctuate with the economy, and we would not want to get caught up in that. So anytime we've used it, it's been for like a one-time.
Yeah, and I like what you said
appropriation.
as well. We try to view it as spreading it around, so there are many, you know, townwide beneficiaries. That's not perfect, but it's served a broad purpose so far, and it will for years to come, and
And
that's
we
good.
felt that those were visible projects that people could see,
Yeah.
something was
Right.
getting
And-
done,
and
and that
benefit
we could
directly.
tie to
Direct
the meals
benefit,
tax,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's great.
So-
Any other, before we go on to the next? Okay. Oh, Tony, please. Please identify yourself for the record.
Anthony Mullen, Pond Street in Westwood, Chair of the School Committee. On the debt piece, do you have a sense of what the capacity is, either within 2.5 or outside of 2.5, that we could take on to be within kind of guidelines to keep our rating? The debt capacity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have another slide on that. I don't have it here tonight, but that is something we typically do show at town meeting. We have a quite large capacity as far as what debt we can take on
Right.
and still be within our overall debt capacity.
We're well below,
Well below.
but we should include that when we get to our
Will
capital
do.
discussion.
Yes.
Great, thanks, Tony.
Important for people to see that the $40 million I showed in the earlier slides, debt outstanding, may sound like a lot of money, but for our debt capacity, it's not.
And then what it comes to is, you know, practically speaking, what it does for impact on tax bills, what it does if it's within 2.5 to take resources away from other
Yes.
needs. So we're always balancing, even though capacity might be higher.
Yes.
PM, we had for several years applied 500,000 directly to property tax relief.
Yes.
Is that coming up?
Yes.
Okay, I'll hold on then.
Did that 1 year or 2 years? 1 year?
2 years.
Easy
So
to.
we just have a couple of slides just to kind of review where we are in the current year, the budget that was voted at this May's town meeting. Again, just as kind of a reset for as we start to look forward. So the total expense budget, everything that was voted for FY '20, just over $102 million. That was a 3.5% increase from the prior year. The pie chart shows the components of the budget, and by far the biggest thing we spend on every year, typical for a suburban community in Massachusetts, is our school and municipal operating budgets. So really our spending is to provide those annual services to the community. And we really have strived to make sure that the budgets we vote for those areas are sustainable and stable each year. Much like we talked about before, we're not trying to have wild fluctuations in the budgets for our school and municipal departments year to year. This chart just looks at, for our operating budget in FY '20, $94 million. The components with the school in blue, $46 million, municipal in red, $22 million. Our fixed cost budget, $15.2, and our debt service, $6 million in green. This chart at the bottom shows the increase each year in the school and municipal budget. You can see in the most recent years, FY '18 to '20, we've been in that 3.5% range, and that's really our sustainable level under Prop 2.5. On the left side, FY '16, '17, we exceeded those amounts, just over 5% in FY '16 for school and municipal. It takes additional revenue for us to be able to do that. In those 2 years we have noted there, we were able to use some of the additional revenue coming in from University Station. But really our more sustainable growth is in that 3.5% year. And that is what we strive for with the operating budget, is to try to have budgets that fund what is needed for good service delivery, but that are sustainable going forward. This chart just is a reminder of where we were with that capital budget in the current year. FY '20, we voted for our base school and municipal capital, $2.3 million. You can see that that's a significant improvement over where we had been for a number of years. Our financial policies indicate we should be spending about $2.4 million on our ongoing capital, taking care of our buildings, rolling over our capital equipment. Our public safety and DPW departments are highly relying on their equipment for service delivery. For many years, we were spending only $800,000 for capital for school and municipal. We've tried to increase that each year. With the $2.3 million, we're almost 3 times what we were doing for a number of years. So we've much improved there. But because we were under target for so many years, the town has, in the last couple of years, presented and had approved by town meeting additional capital above what we're calling the base. So when we increase the base to 2.3, we're trying to say we can commit to that level every year. Here we're coming in saying, can we do more for capital? Again, trying to make up for those years that we've not. So the chart shows for the years that we've done the additional capital article, $750,000 FY '17. We were actually able, in the current town meeting in May, $1.3 million. We're funding this additional capital with free cash and meals and hotels. Again, here we're trying to get at large items that really are difficult for the school and municipal to fit within their regular capital allocation. So we've listed here a couple of projects that were done. Large pool renovations, lighting up the high school tennis courts. The schools had a large IT network project. In the current year, we're doing some HVAC at the Thurston and the COA and some design for field projects. So this has allowed us to really kind of pick up on capital where we hadn't been for a number of years. Just closing out our current year, we still have a few things left to do in the current year in FY '20, really around values and tax rates. And as I mentioned, you'd be doing that at your next meeting. So we are just now getting final values and approval for all of the FY '20 values, including whatever our new growth is. Department of Revenue actually has to certify our values that the assessing department puts together. We'll have our tax rate at your November meeting. You'll have your hearing to allocate the shift from commercial to residential. We then submit and get our tax rate approved by Department of Revenue. At that point, we actually know what our actual residential bill is for the current year. So again, we'd be reviewing that with you in your November meeting. And finally, I just want to mention the capital budget. We did have a couple items that were held over in the spring when you were completing the capital for the current year. So these would be the first items that we'd be reviewing. At one point, we had thought if we had a fall town meeting, we might review them then, but now they'll be the first ones. It was the field lighting project, the fire department equipment, and the other pieces of the road bond. So you'll be seeing those coming.
And Mike, if he gets the road, if we were to do a road bond in May, is that too late for him to do some of the work in the summer?
No, he would, the idea would be to bid it out early, get it already teed up, and if the money got approved, then he could go forward.
I don't know that portion of 109 has a year left.
Todd holds off a lot till school's out.
Yeah, but if we didn't get the approval to May, John's wondering would it
I didn't
actually
want
be
him
able
to
to
start
happen?
bidding at that point.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, I
can-
think he
can
gets a head
bid
start.
He can bid
Subject
in
to
advance.
funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can ask Todd more about that too, I
And
think,
he's
when he comes
coming
in.
in November
Yeah,
meeting, yep.
yeah. Because there is a magic to the process he does to get out ahead of things that
Right.
I
Yeah.
think is really worth hearing about.
He likes to bid out early in
Yeah.
the winter, because that's when everybody's trying to get their work lined up for the
One of the
next
reasons
year.
things are
Yeah.
often done,
The sidewalks look so good, he now needs to come behind it and
Yeah,
do the roads.
yeah,
They do look terrific.
yep,
Big quality of life improvement.
yep.
So we're just going to finish with a quick look at the year ahead.
Okay. Now we're down to the quick look.
Yeah.
Quick look.
That hour,
5 minutes.
that hour has filled it up, Pam. Go ahead.
As always, when you look at the next year budget, you have some overall goals. Trying to maintain the high level of quality service provided by the town and school departments. Trying to maintain moderate growth and sustainable budgets. Continuing the high level of capital investments. It's important to maintain the town's assets, so we're continuing with a higher level of base capital as well as additional. Continuing the compliance and the progress we've made on those reserve and liability accounts. Beginning to discuss and incorporate these larger long-term capital items that are now coming, the school building project and other municipal, and then continuing efforts that you've done over the last several years on trying to limit the tax bill growth. And so part of your budget process is to review what are the tools that you have. And there's several. Not utilizing the full tax levy, applying free cash to the tax rate, keeping capital within Proposition 2.5. And really, you've done all of those over the last several years. So we'd be going through those options with you and showing numbers as you start to do your budget. Those would be the items that you would look at.
Thank you.
As we go forth now and start to do the 21 budget, we start with, what funds the budget. This chart shows in the current year, as we talked about, we're funded fully by taxes, then state aid and local receipts. So as we develop our FY21 budget, we look at how does this revenue change going forward. I just have a quick slide here, the next slide. Calculating the taxes, because Prop 2.5 is a formula, is very easy. This chart is showing you how we do that for the current year's budget. As I mentioned, we don't have all the up-to-date information to do this yet for FY21, but it is a simple process. Prop 2.5 lets us increase our prior year by 2.5%, then add estimates for new growth. And that comes up to the limit on what we can raise in taxes. So we'll go through this chart when that happens. This chart shows the last several years of our tax levy growth. I will point out the town has not had a general override since 2007. That's really kind of a remarkable long-term period, considering what we've been able to do for the municipal and school budgets during that time frame.
So is that for FY 2007?
I think it was voted in 7 for FY08. So almost a
13.
13-year period. So we'll go through this once we have all the final information, but it's really our starting point for our budget for 21, is what do we have in new revenue? And under Prop 2.5, it's a very restrictive process. It really doesn't matter what you might want to do. It's just a calculation from prior years. So we know on taxes that from our increase of 2.5 and our normal estimate for new growth is about $2.5 million. So we would have $2.5 million more in FY21. That number will be updated based on what our final closeout for new growth was in FY20 and what our final university station estimates will be. So it'll be some number higher than $2.5 million. And really, that's our main increase in revenue for FY21 to start our budget.
Pam, when we talk about $2.5 million in new revenue growth from property taxes, we also have money from the motor vehicle excise tax that we could utilize, money from building permits we can utilize, right? I'm just hypothetically.
Yep.
Meals tax, obviously, we have 1.2 million, and we're over on free cash. So although it's 2.5 million, we do have other pockets of money that we can use.
Yep, so we're just, the taxes is 2.5 million. So when we look at a budget, so we're balanced in the current year. So our revenue balances our expenditures. When we're doing budget development for the next year, for fiscal 21, we're saying, what increase in revenue do we have? and then we would be able to apply that to increases in expenses. So our taxes is 2.5 million plus those couple of other items. We will then have, what's that increase in state aid? So will we have
Maybe
additional
100,000.
revenue?
Right.
We then say, what increase do we have in local receipts? Do we want to increase that budget? We typically, in early budget development, level fund the state aid and the motor vehicle. We're here now in the fall, we're not really voting your final budgets until March, so we typically start out level funded, and then we would look to monitor that during the year and increase at that point. And then absolutely, as you said, a big piece is, what are we going to utilize of free cash to build into the budget? What are we going to utilize of the meals and hotel tax? So both of those revenue, we're kind of using what we already have in the bank
Right, right.
versus kind of projecting out.
But again, the meals and hotel tax, we don't use for operating budgets,
Correct.
which
So
is
not used for
largely.
operating.
I want to make sure that,
One
Yes.
time.
I know you've said that before.
And the free
you
cash
said it.
also.
I want to say that again.
Not part of the operating
Well, there's always, I
budget.
mean, there's always competing interests, right? I mean, any year. And so I don't want to leave people with the sense that we have 2.5 million to look at all these various things. We actually have other pockets of cash. We have other levers we can pull.
That was just kind of the one tax item.
Right, right.
Yes, absolutely. But it does show that the model is a difficult one, where our main source
Very
of
difficult.
revenue is just a formula. Really doesn't look at what might the community have to do in that upcoming year. It's really just a formula for your base taxes. So it's our starting point, but it's a difficult formula to work with.
And state aid, I just consider part of the run rate. We just build state aid into our operating budget year over year with minimal increase.
Yes,
Thanks. This was great, Pam, by the way.
Just
We had
gonna-
talked about this for a long time, so
Yes.
we may have put some people to sleep, but I thought this was a great way to do it.
it's-
Great way to put this. Keep
Quick-
going.
Quickly, your next
Pam's
slide.
not done yet.
One item we have to provide for in the budget, unfortunately, it's a big item each year, is the fixed cost budget. So in our current year, we spend $13.8 million on our employee benefits, 1.4 million on our insurance and reserve accounts. So $15.2 million total in what we call fixed cost. So those employee benefit costs are our pension cost, our health care, our payroll taxes, unemployment, workers' comp, all of that. And it's for all of our employees, school and municipal. It's a very large item. When we start our budget, on the next slide, we're looking at what's the increase in that category. In a sense, it's really the first category that we have to make sure we're funding.
Right.
So we already know, our estimate right now for FY '21 is that's $920,000 that we would need to set aside for that bucket. So that's
New.
quite
That's an
a chunk.
increase.
And that's typical. Those include our pension assessment from Norfolk County, we know is $5.7 million. They're on a fixed funding schedule. So we know that number, it's a 7% increase over the current year, $381,000 increase. The health insurance budget, our projection is $6.5 million. We're using a 5% estimate at this point, $310,000. Our other fixed costs, about $200,000, and then the OPEB, as I mentioned before, $25,000 increase to stay on that funding schedule. So quite a large piece of that new revenue has to go towards this. The health insurance will keep that estimate at 5% until later in the year. The GIC usually comes out in February with plan design and March with the final rates. We have more information as we get closer to that time, but that number is an estimate only.
Pam, when I first saw this, I thought the insurance payroll tax estimated increase was high at 10%. Is there a driver of why you have 10%?
It's an estimate, rough estimate at this point. One of the drivers is that one of the payroll taxes municipality pays is a Medicare match. Town and school employees do not pay Social Security. They have to pay a Medicare tax, and the town has to match. And when that new tax came on, it was at a certain point forward. As we have staff retiring out, all new staff is required to pay that tax.
Oh, I got it.
Some of the people who retired
Weren't
out
paying it.
weren't part of that. It came on
Okay.
at a certain point, it was just everybody
so it's-
forward.
So as they age out, the new
As
group
they
is
age out.
paying, so we're seeing an
Before
increase.
that, municipal and school employees were not eligible for Medicare because they never paid into the system.
Right.
So that tax came on. So we have some of that acceleration in there. But that number we will firm up as we move forward in the process.
So that makes sense.
Pam, does the town pay the Family Medical Leave Act The new tax that just went into effect, does the town pick up a portion
Well,
of that?
that's interesting. The new state law on the payroll
Exempt.
taxes for family medical leave, we are
Exempt.
exempt. And I think basically because we really already have those types of policies and coverage in place.
Okay.
But I know other businesses that's all kicked in, and the state did not exempt themselves, and that has come in place. We're fortunate that we don't have to add that into this mix.
Not yet.
Wanna-
That's a pass-through. There's no added cost, no matching from any entity, it's just a pass-through.
No,
No.
no, no, no. It's
Oh, the
50-50.
employers, if you have over 50
Oh,
employees.
okay, I'm
And
sorry.
it's not a must.
Deal with the smaller
It's not like Social Security, it's a may. So you actually, for collectively bargained employees, you have to bargain it.
Yes. So we do not have that in that number.
It's not like Social Security. You don't have it yet.
Really getting to the
Yeah.
final, I promise. So that's the fixed cost. When we look at the operating budget, we mentioned, that's the largest area of our spending. Our combined school and municipal budgets are about $68 million. And all we're showing you right now is just roughly what it costs us to increase those budgets. So a 2.5% increase to both those budgets is about $1.72 million. So each 1% increase, 687,000. It very quickly adds up, and you see very quickly the difficulty in fitting everything into our revenue allocation. Final slide, this is the capital, again, in the current year, 2.3 million, and we would look to replicate that for FY '21.
Did you say that last?
Final slide.
Final slide, thank you, okay.
Good job. Any questions before we wrap up? This is going to be an ongoing process. Really? You got to go back to the mic. You got to go back to the mic.
Just a quick question on the property values. Could you refresh my memory as to when we do the valuation for, the reason for the question is, when do we start taxing the condos at University Station? So what's the timing of when they come on the tax roll versus, and then the impact on the budget?
Yep, so the values each year, the values on what we will tax in the current year, FY '20, is property values as of January 1, except for new growth, which runs until June 30th. So to the extent of what was online by June 30th, we are allowed to add into the current valuation. So the assessing department is completing that right now and going through the review process. Again, at your meeting in November, when you set the tax shift, you will have all of the value information. So what's come online by June 30th down at University Station will be in this year's taxes.
Probably reflecting the investment of construction dollars versus market value on the condos at June 30th.
It would be the following budget.
Correct.
And then if not, it comes in the following year.
It's still new growth to the extent that construction dollars are new, and there's a tax on it, but it's not at the, again, the more assessed value, market value, closer to market value. Okay, so this is part one. Big discussion at November 18th. Split tax rate, capital discussion, and more to follow. I want to thank people for, one, their patience, because this is a lot of material to take in. I'd like to ask that when we post this, and Westwood Media does that, if we put it on our town website, we also have a link through to this document so people can print it out if they want to. I'm sure it will be showing on the visual display, but there is a lot of great information here that it will come up again, and we'll talk about it some more, but the financial policies, where we are, there's a lot of information, and the blending of capital and operating and revenue and everything else can sometimes get a bit overwhelming, so I think it'd be good to have this available to people who are interested. And certainly, there'll be a lot of people who will be interested as we go through the process and discussions with Finance Commission leading up to town meeting.
Yes.
But
And-
excellent
and
job,
Thank you for
Pam.
the time, and again, we've tried to do this so that we're not going again and repeating it to all of
Right.
our other groups.
Right, yeah, well
That's
done.
the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you for people who came out for that. We appreciate, and your work, everybody's work on it is very much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move along. People have been patient. Comcast cable communication will be our next agenda item. And I welcome Melinda Garfield and members of the Westwood Media Center Board of Directors, whoever wants to come up to the table. I know this is being recorded, as was provided to us earlier tonight. I think Comcast is doing a recording of it. Hello, Board of Directors. Thank you for joining us.
You guys put ties on.
Thank you for having us.
Must be important you put ties on.
John?
Nancy,
Yeah.
Bill Hewig, the attorney, is present. That's
Bill.
representing us in the Comcast
Do you want to come over here and sit next to Mike? In the event that we ask you questions, it might make it more convenient. Yeah, please have a seat. We've got an open seat tonight. Okay, let me just tee this up, and then I'm going to hand it over to you. So this is an ascertainment hearing for Comcast Cable Communications Ascertainment License. We do this hearing as part of a process. It's not the end, it's, I don't know, is it sort of the beginning? Kind of at the beginning. And Westwood Media Center is here to advocate for a particular recommendation of what they would like us to pursue in the next round of negotiations to renew a contract with Comcast. And they also have provided us with extensive written testimonials, which, having gone through, it's very helpful to have received those. So I will turn it over to you, Melinda Garfield, who runs Westwood Media Center, and whomever you want to include in the conversation.
Great. Well, I guess we're
Teeing up a
teeing
presentation?
up a presentation. You want to go?
The one we have in the packet?
Yes, I believe so.
Why don't you?
No?
Yeah. So before you hit the play button,
Okay.
I just wanted to open up the discussion. Good evening. Thank you so much, Select Board and members of the Westwood community. And thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight at the Cable Television Franchise Renewal Public Hearing. Westwood Media Center views Comcast as a strategic partner in offering cable and streaming video services to the Westwood residents. I'd like to take this time to play a brief video, and it's going to showcase how the current franchise fees are being utilized to benefit the entire Westwood community.
The winner is Nutritious and Delicious from Westwood Media Center.
In the professional division, annual town meeting. Know before you go, May 2018, Westwood Media Center, Westwood, Massachusetts.
We now have an official media center, and I hope you all get to take advantage of it. Either viewing it at home, being in front of the camera, or supporting the programming that they do.
Very best. I brought with me here a citation from the Massachusetts State Senate and the Massachusetts House of Representatives, an official citation. Hereby extends its congratulations to Westwood Media Center in recognition of the opening of your brand new phenomenal studio, signed by the Senate President, signed by Representative Paul McMurtry, and myself, Mike Rush. Congratulations.
Excellent. Melinda, can you introduce the members of the board? I should have asked you to do that
Absolutely.
before.
It's in my presentation,
Okay.
but I can jump
Then
to
you-
that
No,
right
go
ahead
ahead,
if you'd
do your
like.
thing.
Okay. So if you actually, I will do that. I will back up. Okay. So though our mission hasn't changed much, we believe that it is our duty to provide the residents of Westwood with news, information, and event coverage specific to the town we all live in. In a time where the traditional news source struggles to survive, PEG operations have become the last bastion of truly hyper-local content. Westwood Media Center has 3 full-time employees and now a part-time employee hired to fill the growing municipal meeting coverage requests. In addition to our television channels, we host all of our video content on YouTube. Over the past 4 years, we've outfitted Carby Street, the police station, the library, and now the Little Theater in the high school with robotic cameras, audio integration, and the ability to stream live to our TV channels and YouTube. We always use our social media accounts to alert the community of our new content, as well as share and engage with other local businesses and town departments. And if you forgot where we were, there it is now. And if you haven't stopped by our new studio, which opened in 2017, then you're missing out. We have provided services and equipment to almost every town department, countless youth producers, interns, and community groups. In fact, our transformation has been noticed by groups across the community, made evident by the 26 letters of support we received for tonight's hearing that we hope you've had a chance to flip through. I'm going to hand it over to WMC board members Rob Gotti and Marianne Cassavant now, as they'd like to highlight some of the great letters we've received.
To whom it may concern, I'm writing to encourage you to increase funding to help support the new and vibrant team at Westwood Media Center. As you know, Massachusetts' elder population is continuing to grow, and Westwood elders are now a major part of this town's population. For many elders in town, cable is a vital way to stay connected and informed. In fact, for many, going to evening meetings, Board of Selectmen, FinCom, School Committee, is not only difficult but impossible due to many different circumstances. Moreover, for many seniors, the best way to stay informed and connected is through Westwood Media Center. Here at the Council on Aging, we post all programs on Channel 22, the bulletin board channel, and we know seniors find information there and depend on this partnership. Currently, Westwood COA is taking advantage of the Media Center and creating promotional videos which will begin airing in the fall. And we are pleased that they are able to create elder care videos with the Chamber of Commerce, which are a tremendous resource for our residents. With increased revenue, WMC will continue to grow and continue to be a vital resource to me, my staff, and the Westwood community at large. Thank you for your consideration. That was from Lina Arena de Rosa, the Director of Westwood Council on Aging.
Dear Select Board members, as Superintendent of the Westwood Public Schools, I am writing today in support for increased funding from Comcast Cable to the town of Westwood during its current franchise renewal. I understand that the town currently receives 3% of Comcast's gross annual revenues, and I urge the board to request the maximum 5% capped franchise fees. As you know, having consistent coverage of local boards such as the School Committee, Select Board, Finance and Warrant Commission, and Planning Board promotes more civic engagement, allows for more transparency, and provides an efficient communication vehicle, all of which are fundamental to a productive local government. Notably, as we move forward with the discussions about our elementary school building project, it will be critically important that residents are informed and engaged in the process. To make that happen, we need the Westwood Media Center to provide coverage of community forums, school building committee meetings, and other informational programming. Additional funding would help meet this need. In addition to promoting engagement in decision-making and governance, the Westwood Media Center provides value to the school department in a myriad of ways. From its live stream of graduation to recording school athletic events and student music performances to broadcasting guest speakers and parent programming, Westwood Media Center connect Westwood residents with the school department and allows us to showcase our talented student body. Westwood Media Center helps us broaden our impact by ensuring that parent programming, such as bullying prevention and education about the dangers of vaping, reach a larger audience and continue to serve as community resources on the Westwood Media Center's website long after the event has concluded. Finally, we are excited about the curriculum connections and learning opportunities that the Westwood Media Center provides and would welcome the expanded programming that would be possible with increased revenue. Our students benefit from the Westwood Media Center enrichment classes, workshops, internships, and the ability to apply their learning in areas such as video production or sound engineering in authentic contexts. The ability for students to produce real work for a real audience is exciting, and we hope to work with the Westwood Media Center to continue to expand these types of opportunities and take full advantage of this wonderful resource. Sincerely, Emily Park, Superintendent of Schools.
And finally, dear Westwood Board of Selectmen, or Select Board, I'm just reading. I am writing today in support for increased funding from Comcast Cable to the town of Westwood during our current franchise renewal. I understand the town currently receives 3% of Comcast gross annual revenues, and I urge the board to request the maximum 5% capped franchise fees. I've seen just how vital Westwood Media Center's services are to the community in the following ways. WMC has drastically increased the coverage they provide to Westwood High's athletic department and teams. I've had the opportunity to meet with John Cummings to highlight different sports seasons and have had student athletes talk about their programs. Mike Gay has been doing a show called Around the Hoop to highlight both boys and girls basketball programs. I have been impressed with the increased coverage that WMC has provided to our athletic teams for the last couple of years. They have made it a point to provide commentator and video coverage for as many events as possible, particularly boys and girls basketball, boys and girls lacrosse, volleyball, boys and girls ice hockey, just to name a few. With increased revenue, WMC programs will continue to grow and allow for increased coverage of all sports so that the town of Westwood can watch our exciting student athletes compete and make Westwood proud. Sincerely, Matthew Gillis, Director of Athletics, Westwood.
Thank you. Clearly, we've shared these long letters, but these are just several. Those are just three of over a few dozen letters we received in support of Westwood Media Center. They've come from cross-sections of the community. Clearly, the Westwood Media Center is an important, integral part of the community, and it's providing a valuable service. We've been able to support and provide information regarding our government functions, school programming, individual group gatherings, other community services. I can't emphasize enough how valuable the community seems to think we are and the services we provide.
As you saw from the video, if it's happening in Westwood, it's on WMC.
Great. Thank you. Our dedicated volunteer board, with their great diversity of backgrounds, talents, and interests, has been instrumental in ensuring that our operation is focused on anticipating and delivering on the ever-evolving needs of our community. Our long monthly meetings have strengthened this organization. They are thoughtful, unafraid to challenge ideas, yet respectful in their approach. I'd like to take the time to thank them for their collaboration and support through the years, and that would be Mary Ann Cassavant, John Cummings, Michael Gay, Jim DeLeo, Robert Gotti, and Michelle Sutrich. We are in a very precarious time to be in a renewal with a cable company. As we open our franchise agreement up for negotiations, we must stay aware of any additional terms and threats on the horizon. From 2015 to 2018, the state of Massachusetts saw a 7% drop in cable subscribers. The FCC's recent ruling will reduce revenue through deductions of in-kind contributions. And finally, as technology advances, there is no doubt that the product being delivered to our homes will be reclassified as an internet product, at which time cable operators will no longer have to abide by the Federal Cable Act. I know this slide is doom and gloom, however, we feel it's important to be honest about the state of our industry. So as you are aware, during this renewal process, the town has the ability to bring the percentage of gross annual revenues up from the previous agreement. Our now 9-year-old agreement with Comcast allows for 2.5% of the gross annual revenues. We respectfully ask that the town request for the full 5% cap allowed. If we are unsuccessful, our funding from the competitor will drop, which would be detrimental to our organization's ability to deliver the services the residents have now grown accustomed to. We also seek $250,000 in capital money over the next 5 years. Should we receive a 10-year contract, we'd like to see that number double. As a reminder, this was the same request we had of the competitor 2 years ago. Here's a quick rundown of what our future capital needs over the past 5 years would look like. And finally, we thank you for your time, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think anybody here is going to dispute the value of Westwood Media Center. I think we're all pretty confident that what has happened over the past few years has been extraordinary, and such a resource to the community. And what better thing to be serving up than a resource to the community who wants to know what's going on and participates and enjoys seeing it or is educated by or whatever the result is. It's really quite something. And we can see what the ask is. I have no opposition to going for the full amount. The question is the unanswerable question is what happens as it switches over to the internet, and with the FCC rulings, we have another big issue. It's a question that we can't answer tonight, but I think this gets us somewhere.
Open, right? Isn't that one of the, we're going to leave this hearing open?
I don't know.
For more?
Yes,
Do we need to?
that's what it's, the
That was a
recommendation.
proposed action,
I
but
don't-
I mean, whatever you want to do. So I was going to reserve some comments. I mean, I've said to each of you individually, I'm often amazed at how many people come up to me and say, I saw this on the video, I saw this, so you have a great audience. And I think it's fascinating. And it's
Oh, I see.
I say it's transparent. There's nothing greater than transparent than the camera rolling live. Right? Since I've been on the board, all but one meetings have been recorded. All but one meeting. So that's great.
Really. Just explain to me, we go for this and maybe a 10-year contract, 5, hopefully 10, but the internet transition is going to happen probably within the 5-year period. What happens to the contract then if we do indeed end up people accessing everything through the internet? Does the revenue just decline over that time, over the contract term?
I believe it would be just a cliff.
Oh, it drops.
If they were federally, if they didn't have to abide by a federal law, am I correct? Then they would be no longer.
Counsel.
Well, if they are able to transfer all of their video content out of cable and into internet.
You've got a microphone issue, sorry.
I'm doing this one as well.
Okay, thank you.
I've got it right
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
here. If cable companies are allowed, permitted, or find a way to transfer all of their video content out of cable licensing and into internet, internet is unregulated. So they will essentially be transferring themselves out of the cable business. So the answer is, what would happen to the license? The license will stay in effect until its term, but it may be a minimal or even non-generator of any meaningful revenue for local access.
But we still want to pursue it for whatever term we can and have it
Yes.
in place.
Absolutely.
Right.
And-
So going
and
for 10 is appropriate.
I always say go for the longest one you can get, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That answers that question. Anything?
I thought this was a no-brainer, so I don't know.
As John pointed out, we're being asked to recommend that we keep the hearing open so other people can provide input. And they should. I think it builds your case in the discussions with Comcast as to the importance of this resource. Again, I don't think anybody in this room is going to dispute the importance, but to build the case when we're out there negotiating is really an appropriate thing to do. Anybody else want to comment? Anybody from the audience like to comment? Dave, please go to the microphone and identify yourself for the record.
David Atkins, 85 Parker Street, and a member of the Westwood Planning Board. Two things. I think it's all, the video says it better than I could ever say it, but I just want to observe how spectacular this team has been and what they've accomplished in the last few years is beyond our wildest expectations. I was on the original WestCat board, and what these guys have been able to do is incredible. And it's two things. One is that this station should be the envy of every town and city in Massachusetts because of what they're able to do with 3 people, 2 and another person, the amount of events they cover, and the way they are a part of the community, are becoming even more and more a part of the community. I don't know that other towns or even cities can compare to that. I think they're setting a standard that's incredible excellence. And the second thing is how the transparency, to build on that, as a member of the planning board, we have these long meetings, and then we have hearings that are continued on to the next meeting, and then there are things from those meetings that are discussed at FinCom and Select Board. I'm here tonight because I had forgotten to submit my testimony in time, and I saw this being broadcast, and I said, I better get down there and just make the point that for a lot of us, we can go back and we can look at the recording of these meetings. We can, in a way that previously you had to go to the minutes or whatever, but now I can find out what somebody said. And so when lots of people come to our meetings and testify and have their opinions, we can go back and listen to what they said outside of the moment in those meetings and whatnot. It changes the transparency fundamentally to have this resource available at all of for so many of our board meetings and our community events, the things that are recorded. If you didn't get to go to the school building committee, you can watch that on YouTube or on the cable channel. So it's really changing the dynamic. I think it's a great thing for transparency, and it's a model for every city and town in this state and beyond, probably far beyond anything else in the country. So I think we should do everything we can to keep and support Westwood Media Center.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Anybody else? Okay. Well done.
Two
Yep.
things real quick. One is Melinda's also done a nice job in helping promote that transparency through using some of the paid digital media to let people know of upcoming events and some of the PSAs that we've done around something like the school building committee. And then finally, I just wanted to, this is probably the last meeting I'm going to see Mike, and on behalf of the entire board, just say thank you for always having an open door, an open ear, and for all that you've done for all the years here. Just so that's on the record as well.
It was easy to do for you guys.
Thank you.
Well, it is nice that there's so much collaboration. I think that's really what stands out, the fact that you're here to service this community in such a productive way. So I would like to have us, do we need a vote to keep the hearing open? We should do that procedurally as a vote.
Yeah. And
Why don't
should
we-
they pick a date to kind of say it automatically closes as of this date? Or?
I would say so, because you're
Okay.
encouraging people to submit additional information for
Then
the
why don't we
record.
close
Go
it
into our
November
next meeting?
18th at our next, officially, that's our next meeting date, so that maybe we put it on the agenda just if anybody wants to make public testimony at that time, but we would encourage people to send in written testimony. It's certainly, it stands in the record, easily transferable, so that would be helpful. But why don't we do that? 2 motions then, one to
You can do
keep
it
it
as
open
one-
until
one,
that
but,
date? Whatever you'd like to do then.
I move that we approve the request from the Westwood Media Center for the renegotiation of the percentage up to 5% of Comcast gross annual revenue to be provided for PEG programming as part of the board's license renewal of Comcast Cable Communications. And we will keep this public hearing open until our next meeting on November 18th, 2019, to allow residents to submit written or verbal testimony.
I have a procedural question before we take a second. The motion said up to 5%. Is that okay? That doesn't, we want to go for 5%. Is that okay in the motion,
Certainly,
or would you?
that would give
provide-
maximum leeway to the negotiators, but obviously the goal is to get the 5%.
Okay, great. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. Okay, thank you. Thank you for
you
your
all.
patience to come
you
up
for your
on the
support.
agenda. Good to see you all. Okay,
Bill.
good night.
Will I see you Friday? We've got
Uh,
a meeting Friday.
This Friday?
Okay,
No.
next, we've taken care of
I'll be,
community electricity aggregation is our next
Wednesday.
agenda item.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
And this is a planned public review period discussion. So,
Hello.
are you Stefano?
I am.
Welcome. Thank you for your patience sitting through all our business tonight. And you're with good energy.
Good
I
energy,
understand. And
correct.
we have representatives from Westwood Environmental Action Committee with us tonight, but I think I'm going to turn it over to you. Well, let me just tee this up for a second. We voted at town meeting to undertake a study of the electricity aggregation program, to hire a consultant, which you are our consultant, correct? And now we're here to talk about next steps, or what's been done so far and what the next steps are, and I will turn it over to you, Stefano.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Stefano Loretto with Good Energy. I see the presentation up on the screen. Is that something we can pop open? Perfect. There we go. So this is only a few slides, so don't worry.
Okay, thank you. It's not a 1 hour?
It's only a few slides, so, and I can control it? Oh, great.
John, here you go.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, great. So, well, thank you very much again. This is about a community electricity aggregation program. Quite simply, that is a group purchasing where the city or town arranges for the procurement of all electricity for all the businesses and residents in the town of Westwood that are served by Eversource's basic service. There's the statute, if anybody watching at home wants to go read the particular law. The goals of the program are, and these are in no particular order, really to provide rate stability. Currently, our rates change every 6 months. January 1st, July 1st, we're only notified of what those rates are going to be about 5 weeks before they change. So the program, you can do a 24 or 36-month term, so there's rate stability there. And then there's the addition of local renewable energy options, which are really exciting. You're able to have more renewable energy in the program than what is required by state law. And then every individual account holder can make a decision. There'll be a default option, which everybody gets enrolled into, that may have 5 or 10% to be determined as to more renewable energy. And then there may be an elective that's 100% more renewable energy, and then that's no more renewable energy, which would be apples to apples with the Eversource basic service rate. So there's really something for everybody. If you love green energy, you can have 100%, or you can go to 0%. And there's a competitively priced bid that happens once we get all of the approvals that I'll cover really quickly. So how does it work? Again, anybody that's on Eversource's basic service is initially eligible. Any entity, business, or resident that has their own supply contract. And again, we're talking about if you were to look at your Eversource bill, it's divided up into delivery and supply. Eversource is always going to maintain the poles and wires. You always call them if you have an outage. The supply is what was deregulated back in 1997, where we get all of those mailbox offers trying to get us to change electricity supplier. Well, this is a different option. This is something that's vetted by the town. It's vetted by the regulatory agencies. There's never any penalties. People can leave the program, and there's never a fee for that. People can join the program at any time. When the program launches, everybody will get a letter that will be coming from the town, recognizable with the seal, giving them all the details about the program, what the rate is, comparing it to what the current Eversource rate is. And we have to do this now, but realistically, based on the regulatory process, we're probably not going to be launching the program until the summer or fall of next year. So we're well in advance. We want to make sure that everybody watching at home realizes that this isn't something you're going to see happening over the next few months, especially as we get into the winter rates, which will be significantly higher than you saw this summer. So the town's working on it, but unfortunately these things take a little bit of time with some of the regulatory approvals.
So, Stefan, so initially, if you don't take an affirmative step of opting out, you're in.
You're in.
Okay.
Right. But the program would not launch unless there's savings, unless we're below basic service for that period. So right now, if we were launching, let's say this winter, we would be going to bid after middle of November, so we would know what those winter rates are. And we would always advise not to start the program unless you're starting with a win below basic service. We don't know what's going to happen in July because we don't know what those rates would be for Eversource. But the program would definitely, we would always recommend not to start the program unless you're below the current rate period basic service rates.
And the 30-day opt-out period, though, is the initial start period.
Correct.
They coincide. So the opt-out
Correct.
period is in 3 months before the program actually begins. They will dovetail.
Right. At the end of the 30-day opt-out period, whoever hasn't opted out, those enrollments get sent to Eversource. And really, the opt-out period is just a mechanism by which the program starts. You can leave or opt out at any time for
right,
no
correct.
penalty. It's just the mechanism by which the supplier says, okay, here's everybody, here's, we take out the people that opted out, and now we're going to send all of these enrollments to Eversource and get enrolled in the program.
Thank you.
Again, just a little bit about the process and what's going to be happening. The first step is that the plan goes to the Department of Energy Resources for what's called a consultation. The draft of the plan has been submitted there currently. Then after that, once we get our consultation letter, the plan goes to the Department of Public Utilities. That's a lengthier approval. They ask a lot of good questions. There's over 100 communities that have done this now, so you're not necessarily going to be in definitely uncharted waters there with this, but the department does a good review and make sure that they ask all the right questions and make sure that the town's aware of how the program works and everything like that. Then we go to bid. Once we have all those approvals, assuming market conditions are favorable, we would launch the program. Just as a general timeline, we're kind of putting out there that summer, fall 2020, pending approval. There is a website that Good Energy has created that's just going to have some basic information about the program right now. You see it up there at westwood-cea.com. It'll let you know what the status of the plan is. It'll have a section for FAQs. And during this public review period, we do have a version of the aggregation plan up there so that people can look at it as a PDF and then also go ahead and leave comments or questions as to what the plan is. I touched on the process regarding the DOER briefly. What we're here tonight to kick off is the public review period. This is part of the department's mandatory process. The law was created with a lot of involvement from the public, which is why it starts with a vote of a town meeting, and the public review period is part of that. So part of what happens now, there'll be a script that gets read, and then there'll be a 2-week public review period. Again, I have a copy here of the aggregation plan and hard copy that we typically leave at the town manager's office. People can come in and read it, leave comments, and then those comments, when we have the public hearing, which I believe we have targeted for the next meeting.
November 18th?
In November 18th.
I believe so.
People can come in person, ask questions. We will read any questions that we have received. Those questions will get put and added to the plan and submitted to the Department of Public Utilities. And then at that vote on the 18th, the Board of Selectmen has the option at that point to authorize Good Energy to submit the plan to the Department of Public Utilities on your behalf. And then we wait.
Curious about that, though, if the public comments can come into and still be received that night, do the public comments influence the plan, or is the plan static? How does the public get it
review
factored
period
in?
is actually going to end on I think we had it the Tuesday before.
Okay,
Right.
okay, so people should respond by then in order to have their input
Exactly.
either answered, considered, or
they're
verified,
really
I don't
just
know.
comments. We've never had a plan that has been impacted by comments.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't leave comments or generally.
Well, the
just-
comments will be helpful for this board,
Right, yeah.
because we have to actually make the decision on allowing it to proceed, so.
Yeah.
Will we get a synopsis or full recording of the comments?
Yeah, so we will provide that ahead of the public,
Okay.
ahead of the 18th, we'll provide.
Okay.
Just to manage expectations, if you get 3, that would be, that would be
can
good.
imagine, yeah.
So it's.
But wasn't there a meeting held a couple weeks ago, or
Yeah.
in the past 2 weeks at the
Here.
library, or here?
We had one here, yeah.
And there was input received then, or no?
What input was received? No, I think
Not
it
really?
was, I think
Okay.
it was.
I just want to be sure we capture everything that is.
And again, don't be discouraged. It's not the type of thing that when people hear.
No, I just don't want to
Right.
neglect anybody who goes to the trouble of giving us input. I want to make sure we have that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, okay, so that's the process, and again, after we send it to DPU, you're looking at anywhere from 4 to 12 months. There's currently quite a few aggregation plans in the queue, and that can take, again, we really have no way of knowing how long that will take, but what we've seen lately is that they've ranged about 4 to 6 to 8, 6 to 9 months, depending
Okay.
on the community. So just a little bit more information about the public review period. And again, we're going to actually end the public review period on the 12th. This says the 18th, that's the meeting it's at. But there's going to be, the plan is available on the town's website as well as the Westwood-CEA website. There'll be comments that can be submitted online, submitted in writing, or just read into the record during that public hearing on the 18th.
Okay.
There's a couple of things just to note that I want to make sure anybody watching at home is especially aware of. That nobody affiliated with this program ever will go knock on your door. No one will ever call you unless you've called us and are asking for information, then we'll call you back. No one will proactively call you to solicit you. Any information that is from the town regarding this program will always be recognizable as coming from the town, namely it'll have the town seal on it. And if you're ever in question of whether it's authentic or genuine, always to call Town Hall or Good Energy.
Have there been problems?
Yes.
Okay, so people looking to say, we're selling that and you need to sign up for it, or please tell us so we can tell people what to be, besides not expecting it.
So it may not be a lot different than the calls we're inundated with right now, which can be dubious at best, right? Some of the time, I've received them. I've received a call of people asking me for my Eversource account number to verify if I'm eligible for a discount on my electricity bill. Well,
You don't get calls like that.
Who wouldn't want to be interested? Except I say, wait, you're from Eversource? Yeah, okay, so you verify my electricity account number, and then they hang up. So there's no shortage of dubious companies out there doing this, and whether they say they're affiliated with the program or not, so we've heard some cases where they're going door to door telling people they need to sign up with the town's program or something like that. But it's really no different than just all of that solicitations we're bombarded with in our mailbox, the phone calls, the door to door. So we just want to make sure that the public knows that nobody will ever come to your door.
Can somehow that be posted on the website or
slide.
where this information
The
is?
slide.
Yeah.
Well, somehow where people can go, but also we know at Town Hall, but I think maybe the police department should be informed as well.
And we should put numbers up there. For
Yeah.
people
Yeah,
to call.
and
'Cause,
yeah.
I mean, that would be just, terrible.
Yeah,
for people to be
you may be aware
harassed that way.
You may be aware of the Attorney General, and she's kind of cracking down on some of these third-party suppliers that are really targeting she's identified 3 groups: people that don't speak English as a primary language, low-income folks, and elderly folks, and targeting them and so this is really almost like a safe haven for
I
them.
appreciate your calling that out, that people will not be called and they will not be solicited door to door. If anybody's doing that, they are not to be responded to.
Right, and I think most towns have the policy where if somebody's coming to your door, they need to register with the police department.
Right,
so
that's
you
why
should
I suggest the
absolutely,
police department
you
needs to know.
Get their information and then call the police department and make sure
Yeah.
that they're registered
Right.
and so forth. So, yeah, one of the things I always want to make sure, especially because the program isn't going to start, and even if it was starting, we want to make sure that people are aware
People
of what's
don't
not
need
going
to
to
be
happen.
solicited.
Right,
That's-
you don't
that's
need
not
to
what
be
this is,
solicited.
yeah,
Right.
about.
No one's ever going to call you. No one's
Right.
ever going to knock on your door. If they do, they have nothing to do with this program, regardless.
At some point, if we approve it, though, people may receive a mailing.
So people will receive a
Because they
mailing
need
at
to be
some
told if
point.
they want to opt out, how to opt out.
And before they get that letter, they will receive a letter that we will create. So collectively, we have we will, whether it's a postcard or a letter, letting them know what to expect. So sometimes people think it sounds odd, but you're sending people a letter, letting them know they're going to get a letter. Well, that way at least they're prepared for it. They understand what's going to happen. They can go to the website, read about it, and then they get the letter, which it has a lot of required text in it from the Department of Public Utility, and it's pretty dense, and it doesn't necessarily, it may not be so user-friendly. So we want to let people know that when they get it, they recognize the document. Sometimes we do a big print-up of it and leave it in town hall, just on a tripod there, so people come in, they kind of see that
That would
letter.
be a good thing, Mike, to consider at some point for the Westwood Wire, when that timing comes up, that it goes out as a notice. We just have a electronic communication.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
That goes to many people, so I mean,
That's
there's an
fantastic.
audience that watches this, but that's small, and we have to build on people finding out in advance.
And we've talked about that, which is
Good.
really such a great, useful tool. And then we can do videos. I know the folks that were just sitting here, maybe we do something with them
Right.
at some events. So once we get the department's clearance and we know we're going to go to bid, that's when we ramp up a whole public awareness program, which will be a lot of public meetings, especially with folks at the senior center who are most susceptible to this. And just general meetings in town that we make sure to just get the word out. And I think both the folks that were here as well as the Wire could be a very useful tool in doing that.
Great. That makes good sense. Any questions?
Nope.
Any additional questions, I should say? So we have action to take in terms of the review period. Can you?
I move that we open the community electricity aggregate plan for a 2-week review from October 29th, tomorrow, through November 12th, 2019. The 2-week review period is for residents to submit written comments concerning the aggregation plan. Oral comments will be received at a public hearing, at our next public hearing for the Select Board on November 18th, 2019 at 7:30 right here in the
Gillette Meeting Room.
Gillette Meeting Room.
Meeting room.
At the police
It's
station.
hard to get used to.
Second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very clear, very helpful, and I think communication is going to be key.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you very
thanks for
much.
coming out tonight. Okay, we still have work to do here. This is, we're paying the price for short meetings for a while. This one's going to be a long one.
Yeah.
Next up on our agenda is a discussion of, or request to provide advanced approval for next year's Pan Mass Bike Challenge Kids Ride, requested to be held on May 31st, 2020. But for planning purposes, the group wants to know they're good. This is an annual event that is marvelous, and it includes so many families and children to do this bike ride around the Martha Jones neighborhood, and I just commend the people who continue to keep this going. It's wonderful, such a great cause, and support for the Pan Mass program. I don't think there are any questions. It seems to run very well each year. I haven't heard of any issues, and I know, again, it's planning purposes, approvals have to be obtained, but let's give them the chance to keep going.
I move that we approve the 13th Annual Pan Mass Challenge Kids Ride to be held on Sunday, May 31st, from 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the Martha Jones School with refreshments, contingent, of course, upon the approval from the Board of Health and the Building Department and, I guess, the Police Department.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Mike, please let them know we're happy that they're doing this again. Okay, moving right along. Next item, Metropolitan Planning Organization has an election coming up, and we are in the Metro West Regional Collaborative subregion, and it happens to be the only region that has a contested vote to be the representative community in the region. Both the town of Ashland and the city of Framingham are interested. We have a recommendation to support Ashland by and large because we'd like to have a town, or the recommendation is to have a town be represented in this. The other regions, there are 3 others, have one city mayor is running unopposed, and then there are 2 towns. So the recommendation is to do the town of Ashland. Is there any discussion? Do we have
Works
any?
for me.
Do you?
No.
Okay, so then we'll go with the recommendation. Can we have a?
I move that we complete and submit the 2019 Metropolitan Planning Organization ballot, and to authorize Steve Olenoff to vote for the town in the event there is a runoff. The town of Ashland?
And we want to support the town of Ashland.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't say that in the motion.
No, but vote for the town of Ashland in the event of a runoff.
Second.
We're also filling out the town of
You are
Ashland.
filling out the
Fill it
town
out,
of
yeah.
Ashland.
Okay, so amend to say, to vote for town of Ashland and vote for them if there's a runoff. You're saying second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none.
Getting late for you.
A little, well, no, I want to make sure everything's in the motion, that we're doing it right. And yes, it's getting late.
I can read. I can read.
No, but it doesn't say that.
It does.
No,
It does.
you were doing what it said. Mike, should we try to do the next 2 items?
Yes, I think they're pretty straightforward.
Dan
so-
was here.
Yeah, he had to.
Had to
He
leave?
had,
Okay.
he had an,
Yeah, okay.
something
Had
he
to
had to leave for, unfortunately. We ran a little long here. Okay, so our next agenda item is regarding the terms of engagement we have with the law firm Pierce Atwood, which Dan Bailey is a partner at. Dan has served the town in many capacities and very aptly with both representing the Select Board as Special Town Council for University Station, Special Town Council for us on the land disposition agreement for Islington redevelopment, and as interim town council between Tom McCusker retiring and Pat Ahern coming on board. And so with the evolution of things, first we're being asked to approve new terms of engagement that has been presented to us in a letter to Mr. Gillette dated October 22nd. And do I need to read this into the record, Mike? or-
No, you can just
Okay.
refer to it as presented in the.
As presented, and in that letter, he specifically identifies the scope of engagement, and I'll just highlight it would be continued activity as it relates to ongoing development at University Station, anything in connection with the land disposition agreement for the ongoing Islington redevelopment project, and lastly, to provide assistance to our current town council, Pat Ahern, on an as-needed basis relating to real estate matters. And an example of that is his assistance with Mr. Ahern on the closing of a sale of a parcel at Gay Street that was approved to be sold at our town meeting last May.
Right.
So that's
Another example is he's been consulting with on that Route 1 billboard sign.
Okay, so Dan provides a valuable resource in real estate-related matters. So are there any questions for Mr. Gillette?
I mean, I'm fine approving this. He has a long relationship with the town. But Pat obviously is not here. One of the tasks we had said when we hired new town council was that we would look at all of the use of outside counsel and
Yes.
just figure out what is our long-term plan. So we had, there were 3 outside attorneys here tonight representing various interests of the town. I just think we need a document or an understanding of, is that the model we want going forward? Do we need all of these people? Are there things Pat could take in-house? So I'm fine moving forward with this, with the caveat that I'd like a plan.
I'm sure Pat is building on that, and
Yeah.
that's appropriate.
And,
Yes.
and this is a specific one that he negotiated with Dan together, and then they came to me with what they were planning, so.
I didn't realize that was happening.
Huh?
So
Yeah.
that's fine.
Well,
I guess-
it was more because it was a refinement of
existing.
of what he was
Yeah.
currently providing in a role. So he's limiting his roles.
Questions for you?
Mike, is there a term on it? It seems to be open-ended. I just didn't know if we were doing it for a year, 2 years. I do know that it says that their rates go up January 1st every year.
Yeah, we didn't, I don't think there's a term that's been
No.
specifically mentioned.
Why don't
in
we
here.
build into the motion, subject to annual review?
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think,
we can do that.
I think that, consistent with what John is saying, and we did talk about that this should be an annual review by town council. We shouldn't just get stuck in a certain pattern and not go through a review process. We should reaffirm or
Or
adjust
readjust. Yep,
annually.
I think
So
that's a
So why?
My
given-
experience with these firms is that that's probably a good idea to annually look at it, because
Yeah, I
otherwise
agree.
they just
So
continue.
it could be like approximately annual, because not everything's done tonight.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So I move that we approve the terms of engagement for Pierce Atwood LLP and Special Counsel Dan Bailey as presented in a letter to the Westwood Town Administrator dated October 22nd, 2019, also included as attachment to our package, subject to annual review by the Select Board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. And then we go on with a request, again from Pierce Atwood and Dan Bailey, regarding a conflict of interest waiver. And this is often necessary, and in this case has been presented to us by Special Counsel Dan Bailey and his firm in order to provide legal advice for potential development in Westwood. I think I'm just going to read what you've provided us, Mike, unless you have any
That's
concern.
probably a good idea.
The background is we want to avoid any potential, or to avoid any potential appearance of a conflict of interest. Mr. Bailey is requesting that the Select Board grant a written waiver to himself, his firm Pierce Atwood, and those individuals that act under his designation as special counsel, as they've been asked to provide legal advice to Beth Israel Deaconess on a potential development in the town of Westwood. The proposed Beth Israel project is on Wilson Way and is not in any way associated with either University Avenue or the Islington redevelopment, on which Mr. Bailey has continuing responsibilities for the Select Board. Mr. Bailey represents that at no time will he or his associates who work under his designation appear before any board or commission on behalf of Beth Israel. There is no matter in conflict or active litigation at this time. Should any conflict or litigation occur, neither Mr. Bailey or other members of his firm that act under his designation of special counsel will be involved in that litigation unless the town and Beth Israel's interests are aligned in the litigation. Parenthetically, for example, if a third party were to appeal permits issued by the planning board to Beth Israel, close parentheses, comma, and then only with the consent of the Select Board. So in other words, he'd have to come back and
Talk to you.
and talk to
get
us.
permission to
Okay, so this is a very specific conflict of interest waiver as it relates to Beth Israel being proposed to go to Wilson Way. Are there any questions, comments for Mike?
No, I'm fine. I mean, there is no conflict. It's-
There is none.
Right.
It's
And
an
that's what you're,
appearance.
that's what you're declaring, so nobody
Yeah,
has,
no, I'm
nobody
fine.
can allege it.
Mike?
So, yeah, forgive me, but Wilson Way is down behind Mercedes and that
Yeah,
area?
that's correct. It's down in the back. If you go back and
Yeah.
follow
It's a
that
vacant
road
building right now.
past Frugal
Right,
Fanny's,
Yep.
that's it's the old office building that's back there.
Yeah, and there's some other, I don't know, some company back there that has all the doors locked down and you can't even get in, so it must be some medical place, but,
Yeah.
okay. All right, just for those at home who are like me, Wilson Way is one of those places that you don't
Yeah,
hear a
it's-
lot about, but,
It's,
okay.
it's a dead-end area.
Yes, okay, so let me go back here. So I move that we accept the conflict of interest waiver for Dan Bailey, Pierce Atwood LLP, and any individual that will act under his designation as special counsel in relation to the proposed project for Beth Israel Deaconess on Wilson Way in Westwood.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Moving right along, Select Board future meeting dates. Tish sent out an extensive schedule, so we have meeting dates that...
Look, it goes all the way into May, so it's not...
Right, I believe, I said extensive. I believe that Tish said there was concurrence, and there's one exception, and we'll visit it as we
Gets
move
closer.
closer. Either having a meeting on Monday, April 27th, or possibly Wednesday, April 29th, and we can address that in the future. And the schedule will take us right up to the annual town meeting, which is Monday, May 4th, 2020. And it's pretty full, and we are wrapping meetings around Finance Commission meetings, public hearings, so we can be able to attend those. So any questions on that?
I was
Okay,
fine with
so-
them.
No.
Okay,
I don't have
think
a
we have to
problem
take a
with any
vote.
of them.
You don't have a problem, good, Mike, because you never know when we're going to call upon you to be here.
Text you in Aruba.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think this, I think you can stay in the room for this. As I mentioned at the top of the evening, we've asked Mike to stay on as interim town administrator through December 6, 2019, comparable terms to those that we've had over the course of the summer and this fall, and we just need to vote to approve a contract extension. Any questions?
No, so that gives you, 10 days overlap, Mike?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
from 25th to the 6th.
Which part of that's a holiday, too?
Right. Thanksgiving is in the middle there, and
Yeah.
probably the day after Thanksgiving is off, too.
Yes, usually, anyway.
Okay, so I move that we approve a contract extension for the interim town administrator, Mike Gillette, from extending it from November 15, 2019 to December 6th, 2019. And I suppose he'll be officially retired at that point.
Yeah.
Officially, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Yep, that kind of does it, Mike, with the, I don't think we're going to be doing extensions after that.
No, I
so
think that's the last one of them.
you can have time to get ready for the holidays. Okay, we don't have minutes to review tonight, which is fine. We were all caught up. So that would only be from the last meeting, and we can do that next time around. So now we will go into executive session, and let me read the purposes for which we are doing that. The Select Board will be going into executive session to discuss 3 issues. The first is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, for a potential litigation regarding a land issue located on Providence Highway. To discuss this issue in open session would have a detrimental effect on the Select Board's ability to defend the town's interests. The second and third matters are pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the DPW union, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the SEIU clerical union. To discuss these issues in open session would have a detrimental effect on the Select Board's ability to bargain. The board will not be returning to open session. Our next meeting, as we've said a couple times tonight, is on Monday, November 18th. It will be here in the Gillette Meeting Room at the police station at 7:30 p.m. May I have a motion for executive session?
So moved?
Second on that?
Second.
Mr. Walsh?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
And I say aye as well. Again, we will not be returning. Thank you and have a happy Halloween.